Hey everyone, welcome to TechStrong TV. I'm Alan Schimmel, and today's Monday, February 15th, President's Day for many here in the U.S. It's also halfway through Monday. We just got through with Valentine's Day. Hope you had a happy, romantic Valentine's Day with your loved ones. We are back, though, in work, and we've got a great TechStrong TV lineup in store for you today. Let me jump right into it. My first guest is Jason Meese. Jason is the CEO of a company called Cloud Entity. You know, Cloud Entity is, as a company, well, it's a fairly new name for the company, but the company's been around, I think, about 9 years or so. But they've really kind of focused in on their mission rate recently, which is about identity access management as it relates to governance and policy within the cloud and cloud identities, both for people as well as machines. So, good interview there with Jason Meese. After that, I am happy to have Buddy Brewer from New Relic on. You know, New Relic's been going through a bit of a metamorphosis. New CPO, well, he's not new anymore, but we interviewed their CPO when he came on, and they really refreshed their whole product line to make New Relic, which was already one of the easier products to use, to make it even more easier, more intuitive, and more valuable. The next iteration of that's here, and Buddy's going to tell us all about it. After that, we have Mike Jones from Haunted Hacker. This will be part one of a two-part of Haunted Hacker, and I think you'll enjoy that. Mike is, of course, one of the original founders of the hacktivist organization Anonymous, and a really smart security guy. I think you're going to enjoy it. After that, we're going to go to something old, and we're going to take back to Predict. Not that old, just last month, less than a month ago. And we have Anna Margarita Medina, a chaos engineer at Gremlin, and she's going to tell us why 2021 is the year to adopt chaos engineering. If you're not familiar with chaos engineering, you really don't miss this one. It's a good one. After that, we're going to turn things over to our Chief Content Officer, Charlene O'Hanlon. And Charlene will have the news around the MediaOps websites today, as well as two good videos. One is with James Lee. He's the COO of ITRC. And ITRC recently announced their 2020 data breach report. It's that time of the year, I guess, or the season. So Charlene has a good conversation with him. And then Charlene also has a good DevOps Institute Ambassador Insights panel discussion with Leonard Murillo, CTO of Quinix Technologies, Tracy Bannon, Senior Principal DevOps Strategic Advisor and Software Architect at MITRE, and Paul Plows, Lead Systems Engineer at EPAM System. It's a good conversation on cloud native, the impact DevOps it has in the development environment in general. So don't miss that one. And then also Charlene will give us a preview of what promises to be a great week of webinars here on MediaOps sites, DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal. After that, we'll take a little break, and then we've got Mike Vizard, Mike's Place, lined up. And Mike has an interview with Kong CTO, Marco Palladino. Kong, of course, raised about $100 million, $100 million last week in another round of funding, joining the ever-expanding list of unicorns. I don't know if we could call them unicorns anymore. There's so many of them. If they are unicorns aren't mythical. But anyway, congratulations to the Kong team, and Mike has that whole story there with Marco. I'll be back to wrap things up. That's it for Monday, February 15th. Let's take a quick break right now for a commercial, and we'll be right back with a great lineup. As I mentioned, Cloud Identity has been around for a while, and they really focused in on their mission of contextual authorization for authorization governance and policy enforcement around identity. Here's my interview with CEO Jason Meese all about it.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another TechStrong TV segment here. My guest for this segment is Jason Meese of Cloud Entity. Jason, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Yeah, thanks for having us out. Appreciate it.
It's our pleasure to have you on here. So Jason, it's kind of a case of first impression, as we say. I don't know if our audience is familiar. I'm sure not everyone in our audience is anyway. So why don't we start, if you don't mind, give us a little Cloud Entity kind of background and maybe a little bit of your background as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thanks for having us. Long-time listener, first-time caller. So Cloud Entity really started out in 2011 as a company called Integrity Networks, kind of in and around the services space, and had kind of that inflection point in the 2016 timeframe when they realized cloud was really starting to take root, right? We knew it was there. We knew it was going to be pervasive, but we weren't fully grokking all the changes that were going to happen. And so the pivot to product happened in 2017, specifically around a really large telco that all of a sudden had to onboard 1 billion identities of machines and people, and realized just the scale wasn't quite there. So pivoted the focus towards product. So we've been a product company since then. We did our Series A with both Forge Point Capital and Westwave Capital in the August timeframe of 2020, which during the pandemic was an interesting process, but was good for all in that regard. But obviously, the pandemic's not good across the board. And really, it's helped us refine our product market fit and really lean into the growth, specifically around cloud transformation. A lot of the customer base is high value transactions, B2B2C, so a good amount in the banking space, financial services, healthcare, telco. And so excited to unpack the story a little bit deeper, and thanks for having us on the show. In regards to myself, I like to call myself a recovering product manager. So started cutting my chops at Sun Microsystems back in the day. That's actually where I came across, the primary co-founder, a gentleman named Nathaniel Coffin. And so I used to say a decade, I now have to say two, since I started there in 2000, right in time for the dot-bomb situation, which was always interesting tales for those who've been at it for a while.
Been there, done that.
Oh, exactly. And so, it's interesting because a lot of the stuff we were talking about then still is manifesting itself going forward, right? And we'll get to some of that too in the story. So spent a fair amount of time on the product side, then made a conversion to the dark side and went to go to market, did a good amount of sales, both the end of Sun Microsystems into Oracle, had a chance to work at another startup that we exited to KPMG. So a little bit of time on the services side. Then went over to IBM to help lead some of their product management efforts. And now here at Cloud Entity, where I'm the CEO and been here just under 2 years now. So exciting times.
Good stuff, Jason. Excellent. Yeah, no, you know what? That journey you're talking about rings a lot of bells. And we are still trying to, here's the real deal though. A lot of what we dreamed about in 2000 and 1999 and 2001 is now actually possible. Are we doing it great? Sometimes not. But at least it's possible. I helped put together an ASP, application service provider. We were a big Sun shop back then. And, this is before there was a cloud, right? We didn't have the virtualization aspect. We have ubiquitous connectivity, still reselling the same T1 line over and over. And quite frankly, the software wasn't set up for multi-tenancy, right? And so where today it is a bit of a different push. So you guys had a services company, or not you weren't there at the time, but this was a service company play for, sounds like 7-8 years, something like that, and then transitioned to product. And believe it or not, this is not the first time I've heard this kind of journey.
Right. Yeah, it helps, yeah.
Well, people, after doing services, and you get so ingrained, you understand the fact patterns better than anyone, right? You understand the pain points that your clients are having.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a need for a solution, just that solution doesn't exist. And after a while, someone gets the idea of just, God darn it, I'll do it ourselves. We'll build it. And, this is what the market needs. And you go out and do it. So congratulations for the foresight, over there on that. So let's talk now about, what exactly Cloud Entity's doing and what are some of the kind of problems that you're solving here.
Yeah. And if you go back a little bit, and in your segue there was a perfect one, because what really led to the impetus of Cloud Entity was a realization there was a missing piece. So even if you go back literally to 2020 or 2021, 2001, sorry, I'm even dating myself on that. Hard time to go 20 years back. But for anyone to have some type of interaction with a computer system, we talked about authentication, authorization, and audit. Literally used those words forever. And that middle piece, authorization, has really been the bugaboo for quite some time. And if you look at where Cloud Entity fits, it's really this concept of dynamic authorization. And at a macro level, for the business folks out there that might be listening, if you think about authentication, it's really establishing session. How do you basically log in and at least know you're in the right systems? Authorization is all about context, making sure the right people or the right systems are accessing the right data, and you really start to control it. And then you have to audit it. And that really, that inflection point is what led to Cloud Entity's formation as a product company, because that authorization piece, we have not done a great job over the year, and it's been exacerbated as a problem as we move to cloud more aggressively.
Sure has. It really has. So now, got it. We set the historical bench, foundation. 2021, 2020, and agreed, raising money, selling companies, doing this stuff in COVID is, it's a whole nother, it's a whole nother reality. Yeah. But so how are we solving these problems today exactly? What are we doing?
Yeah. So if you look at the way that we've attacked this problem, and identities can have a carbon-based life form approach, you and I users, but we're also now starting to see this concept of machine identity in bots, right? And that's exacerbating the problem as system accounts start to have more access. And historically, we've looked at this, and you will think about this almost from a network traffic flow of north-south. How do we make sure that we secure that? The problem is we've now moved into an east-west world, and the legacy systems are just not scaling. And so we've taken a more modern approach through both containers and microservices to say, how do we fragment this now? And then how do we take the ability to enforce the rules and push them to the very edge of the service, not just the device, but all the way down at the API level? And so this concept of dynamic authorization for APIs really is where we've seen our traction, and specifically where we see the market going. And so what it's allowed us to do is take more of an enhance and expand approach to infrastructure as opposed to rip and replace. The old adage in cyber is better, faster, cheaper will always get you a transaction. But I've never seen an executive that wakes up or a board that says, hey, we need to spend more on cybersecurity this year because we want to. There's a reason for it. And it's kind of like the analogy of brakes on a car. It's so it can go faster in a controlled way. And so as folks start to modernize their infrastructure, we've seen a good bit of saying, hey, instead of pulling everything apart, let's leave some of your legacy infrastructure, be it an on-prem or if it's in a hybrid cloud environment, and then let's slowly decompose it, but use it as an orchestration and automation engine. Let us front end your new emerging services, and this will get to part of our talk track on open banking, in a more cloud native way, specifically at the container level, so you can get better scale, which is important, especially in a B2B2C or B2C environment, but to do it securely.
Got it. I like your analogy with the north, south, east, west thing as well. But really, look, when we start talking about APIs and we start talking about containers and so forth, the scale of the problem here, I mean, it's just not that we went from a north-south to an east-west. We went 360 degrees where we used to be maybe 180, right? And I mean, the numbers and the scope is just, it's great. I mean, when you live in a world where every container has to have its own identity, right? And the average life of a container, we recently did an interview. The average life of a container is 7 seconds.
Yeah.
Right.
That's it.
How the heck you supposed to, how is one supposed to manage that and then have that flow through to an API, right? That's interacting with containers that are changing every 7 seconds, and having that. I mean, you almost have to automate it, right? By definition, because that's too fast for humans to do at scale.
Yeah.
And introducing automation introduces its own set of complexities.
Indeed. Yeah. So, the easiest way I like to kind of break that down is almost tip to tail of the transaction. And, when we would go in and talk to clients, and yes, there's a lot of authentication or IDP, vendors out there for the front door, and we've got gateway providers on the back end making sure that it's enforced. The dilemma we ran into is we would talk to clients and say, hey, do you have a list of all your APIs? And for the most part, they have a pretty good handle, right? API management's there. Then we break it down and say, hey, do you know all the different services those APIs are interacting with? And you start to get a little bit of concern. Then you say, do you have a list and the ability to enforce policy for high value transactions and know what's happening and visibility into that? And that's when you see the problem. And that's where automation is a blessing and a curse. It is now moving at machine speed. But what we're seeing is specifically, open banking, we'll start to see this with open healthcare, are good use cases where someone from the front end says, hey, I'll establish the session and we've got the gateway in the back end, but we now need to do some type of context-aware policy enforcement at the API level. And this is where you start to, get some of the business folks to gloss over. But really all you're saying is there's 2 pieces. There's a know your customer. How can we monetize the relationship? And in certain cases, we've seen some regulatory bodies like in Europe and Australia, Brazil had some recent announcements last month where they're trying to do a top-down approach where they're forcing certain standards around APIs in the banking industry. You've got the US and China taking more of a market-driven approach or bottoms up, saying, hey, let's let the industry determine what's most secure. We've got FDX here in the States. And if you then start to look at which one's been more successful, I would argue that the market-driven one is because you're looking at the monetization in a secure way of your clients. But the regulatory one is forcing, compliance and issues. And so what we're seeing happening is folks now saying, okay, we've got these regulations. It could be a data of residency. It could be something with a high-value financial transaction or healthcare data. And we now need to secure at the API level the entire flow. So we need both an engine to do some type of authentication and authorization. We've got standards out there like OAuth and FAPI, which is basically the financial API protocols that say, here's how you do it. But where it's difficult is, and it's the adage of everything cyber, it always boils down to people, product, and process. And making sure you looked at that holistically and not just the enabling technology is key. And so we offer a solution that's both the enabling technology, so we can do that policy enforcement, but equally, we have a near natural language processing tool that basically allows business analysts to set the policy so everything doesn't have to be done at the command line. And that's where we ran into a lot of issues in the past. They're just so damn complicated.
Yeah, it certainly is. So it seems like the business analyst is the guy who's setting policy. Well, he's not making policy. He's using the tool to enforce the policy.
Exactly. Yeah. And, we hear some other terms like, zero trust bantered about, and that's definitely overplayed word like cloud. But again, if you start to think about it as a framework, instead of a tagline to a marketing slick, it really is saying, hey, let's assume that everything is perimeterless, and let's assume that the network is not necessarily purely trusted. How would we now start to look at this and start to parse out the different data flows? And that's where the value in this is. And the thing is, the genie's out of the bottle. We're not going to go back where there's a castle and moat. It's going to stay distributed and get even worse. And so folks have now really instantiated this. And, the other part that I would say is highly relevant, before the pandemic started, literally about this time last year at RSA, we would spend easily 2/3 of the time explaining why dynamic authorization mattered. Why does policy enforcement all the way at the edge of the service, so that service A can only talk to service B, it doesn't matter, everything else happens, is relevant. the pandemic as an accelerant, not so much a change agent, has forced folks to really come to grips with this and say, hey, we now have to do this, at least for our high value data and transactions. We'll get to the rest of it later. And so we've seen it from, we don't need to articulate why it matters, to now, hey, let's fire up some test kitchen and POCs and let's show the stuff in action. And so, I would say the overall awareness now has left not just the dev community and the cloud architects, but is now permeating the rest of the infrastructure teams.
Absolutely. And here's the beauty of it, right? If they've instituted this for their high value transactions, theoretically, it's already kind of in place. It should be easier to flow through, or is that an oxymoron?
Yeah, no, it is.
Nothing's ever easy.
It was never easy. Yeah, we've been in cyber for this long for a reason. But yeah, no, we are starting to see that it is becoming more instantiated, and they're now looking at it for the other aspects of their business, because they now have the guardrails up, if you will, to start to expand the infrastructure efforts.
Got it. Jason, we're almost out of time, believe it or not, but Cloud Entity, where can people get more information?
So info@cloudentity.com or just cloudentity.com. And we've got a demo, an open banking sandbox ready for folks to go, and would love to answer any questions anyone has.
Very cool. Just in case my funny French accent or you didn't catch Jason, it's Cloud Entity. It's CloudEntity.
Exactly.
CloudEntity.com. Hey, Jason, thanks for joining us on TechStrong TV. I'll be interested because, as you mentioned, right now, a lot of financial industry focus on this, but healthcare is probably coming, I'm going to assume. And manufacturing won't be far behind, as you know, that's kind of the way of these things work.
Indeed.
Yep. Jason Mee, CEO, Cloud Entity, here on TechStrong TV. We're going to take a quick break and be back with our next guest.
Thanks. Have a good one.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Buddy Brewer is up next. Buddy's with New Relic. New Relic has really been on a mission to modernize their product lineup, and they've got a significant new milestone they've announced. Buddy's going to tell us about it as well. It's a little demo with slides and everything. So here now is Buddy Brewer from New Relic.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here at TechStrong TV. My guest this segment is Buddy Brewer. Buddy is with New Relic. Hey Buddy, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hey Alan, thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you on. It's always nice to have the folks from New Relic on, actually. Buddy, I don't, look, we're DevOps.com. I don't think anyone here needs a New Relic introduction per se. But we also have our friends from Cybersecurity and Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and maybe they do. Maybe there are folks out here who don't know New Relic. So why don't we, if you don't mind, give us a quick kind of New Relic background and maybe a little bit about your own background.
Yeah, for sure. Our mission at New Relic is to simplify observability for the world's engineers. We've been at this for 13 years now. We've built pieces over those years across the entire stack, everything from application performance to logs and infrastructure monitoring, front end with real user monitoring, synthetic monitoring, really all of the different pieces that are required in order to observe what's going on in modern software stacks today. And what we've been on this journey very recently, since last July, is to take all of those different pieces, bring all of them together and simplify into a single view so that engineers engineers can see exactly what's going on in their software, no matter where issues might be or no matter what parts they want to inspect. And that's a big part of what we wanted to talk about with you today.
Excellent. I should mention we're a customer, through our we're WordPress, and through our WordPress hosting, we actually use New Relic every month to see how, not just monthly, but you look at it every other day to, see how things are going. Great product. But you guys have some great new announcements. Well, I don't want to steal your thunder. Why don't you tell us, buddy? What's the big news?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, for the past year, we've been taking the things that we're known for and just trying to make it easier, simpler, and faster for folks to reason about what's going on in their software. I know that you spoke with our president and chief product officer, Bill Staples, about some things that some moves that we had made recently. This is another evolution that we're announcing today on that journey of simplification and making it easier and faster for people to understand their software. It's called New Relic Explorer. And what it does is it takes all of the different aspects of what's going on in modern applications today, and all of the containers, all of the infrastructure, all of the user experiences, all of the software code, all of the logs, all the metrics, traces, all that stuff, and brings it all into a single view that's a real-time mission control for folks who are responsible for full stack architectures today to see at a glance what's going on in their software.
Love
There's
it.
two parts
Sounds
to
great.
this. Yeah, there's two parts to this that as we double click, I'd love to get into some more detail, maybe even show you a few pieces of it.
That would be great. I always look up for show and tell. The observability, first of all, when New Relic started, we didn't call it observability, right? We called it monitoring and ALM and all of this kind of thing. But clearly, as in my conversations, as you mentioned with Bill, the market is evolved, and the market wants simpler, the market wants easier. But here's the thing, the criticality of this data and the job and the function that it does is more important than ever. So it's almost sort of an oxymoron, right? I want it to be more the job has become more complex and more critical. Oh, but I want the solution to be simpler. Right? And sometimes that's how do you make that, work? And look, I don't envy you guys in having to do it, but I'd love to see, or maybe if you can tell us more about, how New Relic is accomplishing this.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, one of the hardest things in the world to do is to take a complicated problem and simplify it enough so that a person can reason about it, but not oversimplify to the point where you lose fidelity and you actually can't get tasks done.
Right.
And so,
you don't want to dumb it down is the thing.
Yeah. And so like a lot of the stuff that we do, we approach on, just trying to manage multiple altitudes at once. So you can see the summary view, which is where it's the insertion point of this new part of New Relic 1 that we're launching is giving you that summary view. But it's not enough to just have the summary. You have to be able to click down quickly into the details, but in a focused way on the parts that matter. And the ability to focus on those granular details are really, that's the part I think that's changed the most in the last, say 5 years, as people have shifted their application architectures from monoliths to microservices. Used to be you really only had one big thing to kind of reason about, and you could get to those details without having a lot of risk of like looking in the wrong spot, because there was just the monolith that you needed to look at and reason about. We've got customers now with thousands and thousands of individual services, just so many pieces in that haystack to try to find the needle that you actually want to inspect the details of. And so getting from that macro view, it's important to have the macro view, but then being able to navigate to the individual part, the service that's having the issue, and doing that quickly in a world where I think there's a Gartner number that they put out a few years ago that a typical business is exposed to $5,000, $5,600 of revenue impact per minute of downtime. When those seconds are ticking off the clock, getting to that granular view is more important than it's ever been.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I don't doubt those numbers. Buddy, I know you've got some slides and some stuff we can use to share with the audience. Is it okay if we jump to it now, or do you want to set the ground a little bit more?
Yeah, let me show you. Let's just jump right in. I mentioned that what we're announcing is called New Relic Explorer. It's a single real-time view that takes all of the pieces of your application stack and puts them all in one place, like a mission control for your telemetry data. There's two parts to New Relic Explorer. This is the first one. This is New Relic Navigator. And what it does is it takes, for folks who are familiar with New Relic, in the past, that we had all of these different individual components that you could instrument and then reason about all in one system. That's what we call New Relic One. So, you can have services in some places, hosts that you have infrastructure monitoring on in others, front end experiences that you're measuring, all these different things that you could look at. What Navigator does is pack an order of magnitude more information density into a single screen. And then what you can do is take all of that information and pivot it by different groupings that make sense to you. So what we're seeing here, just as an example, is looking at different containers, services, synthetic monitors that are looking at the front end experience and these workloads and showing you at a glance based off of alert status, what's green, yellow, and red. So if you imagine like a critical moment for your business, like a launch day for a major new release that you're putting out, that you're turning up to 100% today. Or maybe a major, we just came off of the Super Bowl here in the US. So I imagine there were a lot of people that were looking for screens like this last night to see what all that traffic that they were driving through those very expensive advertisements were doing to their software. When they acquire that traffic, make sure they can actually serve the experiences that they want to serve. So the idea here is that you can see it at a glance, it's simple, and it looks across the entire stack, not just at an individual silo. So this is the problem that a lot of people have had before, is they had way too many tabs open. We're asking individual engineers, SREs, and other technology professionals to see across all these different dimensions. But if they had a tool for logs and a tool for infrastructure and a tool for front end and a tool for applications, those are all different tabs that people had to flip between in their web browser in order to reason about really one thing, which is what's the quality of the experience that I'm giving to my users. So the objective here is to put it all in one view, and then you can structure it in the way that makes sense to you. So part of New Relic Navigator is this notion of what we call workloads. And what workloads allow you to do is, using tags, you can structure, imagine having thousands of different containers and services and all sorts of different things that go into making all these different user experiences. What workloads allows you to do is to curate that information down to concepts that are unique to your organization. One of the things that we talk a lot about internally at New Relic is that we might build software that observes what's going on in computers, but the people who are using this are human beings. And those humans, organize themselves in teams. And so it's not enough just to generate all this telemetry about computers and then just regurgitate it all back out to a screen somewhere. We have to be thoughtful about the way that people organize themselves in order to actually manage this huge amount of data that's flowing through today about what's going on in systems. And so what you see here is an ability that you have to structure subgroupings of all of the different types of information that you're generating in your application estate into screens that make sense for individual teams. So you could imagine like maybe an e-commerce company has a workload for each team that's assigned to each step of the funnel, or whatever you want, different games for gaming companies, or different, however you've structured your organization, so that people can see in a summary view the real-time health of their system. And then, like we were talking about earlier, be able to very quickly click to drill down into specific details if something goes wrong. So that's the first part. That's what we call Navigator that's coming out. There's a second component to New Relic Explorer that we're launching. And it shares some of the same characteristics in that it's about helping you get that at a glance view, that mission control, but it does it a little differently and maybe targets a slightly different set of use cases. And it's what you see here. We're calling it New Relic Lookout. And I think maybe the best way for folks to think about New Relic Lookout is imagine if you had something like the Unix diff command that you could run, but on all of your telemetry data in real time, and then visualize it in a screen where you could see all of it at a glance. That's really what Lookout does. What it's doing is it's taking the data, your telemetry data from right now, and then comparing it to the telemetry data from some period of time ago. It could be an hour ago, it could be 30 minutes ago, it could be a day ago. And then telling you, highlighting what the differences are. So it's not dependent on pre-configured alert statuses. In fact, it's actually a zero config way of looking at your telemetry data. And part of the problem that we're trying to solve here, and this is one of the things that we've learned as our customers have shifted toward these microservice architectures, is when you've got thousands and thousands of components on any given day that are making your software go, something is always red. Right. So if a customer calls in and they've got, like our customer, if they're our customers, the end user of some website somewhere calls in or mobile application and they're having a problem, whoever's responding to that issue, when they log in, they're going to see things that are red. But guess what? Some of those things that are red were red yesterday. So what you really want to see is what changed in the last hour. And that's what this view does. So, you notice it's shaded from yellow to purple, showing you what has gone dramatically down or dramatically up. So looking at those changes, that's the intensity of the shading there. And then the size of each of these balls is the scalar value of the number of requests, in this case in throughput, the number of milliseconds in response time, or the number of errors. And you really need both of those dimensions in order to discover where to focus your attention. You need to know what's the intersection of things that are highly active right now and also changed a whole lot recently. This allows you to see that at a glance without having to do any advanced configuration. So many of the problems that our customers are experiencing today, because of the complexity of software systems, are problems that they couldn't have anticipated ahead of time. And so they wouldn't have had, they might do this as part of a retrospective, and maybe they add some alert criteria and things, but they wouldn't have had alerts in place to actually, anticipate some of this stuff. So this doesn't rely on alerts. It helps you see in real time and explore through Lookout what's going on and what's changed in your system, and then drill down like you see here. And what it's going to do as part of this drill down view is show you correlated services. So whatever it is, the bubble that you click on earlier, you can see a little more detail about that bubble. But then also what the system's going to do is it's going to discover correlations of other services and components and containers whose telemetry changed, either went dramatically up, like maybe a response time shot up at the same time and it's correlated, or went dramatically down. Like maybe you've got a service that typically serves, a couple thousand requests a minute, and all of a sudden it's dropped to like 10. So you can see all of that stuff, without having to do any configuration. So the common theme between these, New Relic Navigator and New Relic Lookout, is really about simplifying things for developers. We've seen the responsibilities of individual developers change so much, even just over the last year or two. People who used to be responsible for just single functional layers of the stack, maybe they were a application tier person, or they were an infrastructure person, or they were a front-end developer, their roles are changing. People are now responsible for all of those different layers, all in service of delivering a particular customer experience. And, again, they're having to use tools where they've got these web browsers with a dozen tabs in them that they have to flip back and forth. We're trying to simplify that by giving people a single view. And it's something that, it's not going to be sold separately by New Relic or something that takes, a bunch of effort for someone to adopt. It's an in-place upgrade. Everyone who uses New Relic, you'll be able to use it on your WordPress sites.
Wow.
As we roll this out, it'll be an in-place upgrade automatically turned on for everybody.
Fantastic. New Relic has always been known for really intuitive, great interfaces, and this looks like it continues that. So now that you made it personal, though, when can I expect this upgrade?
Elena's got the details.
All right, we'll get details out.
Yeah, it's officially launching this week on Wednesday, and it'll be rolling out to customers over the next couple of weeks. So they'll see it soon.
So this will launch. Okay,
It'll
and that's
it'll
Elena
launch
from
on.
the New Relic team. No, we're
Yeah.
gonna have to put that audio in there, so no problem. Sounds good, buddy. So it launches, and is there any extra cost with this, or what's the story?
Nope. And this goes back to the changes that we made that you spoke with our president and CPO Bill about. We want to simplify everything about what we do, not just the user experience. So New Relic Explorer is all about simplifying the user experience when you log into New Relic. We also took a lot of steps last summer to simplify the way people use New Relic. So everything's merged together and you've got one complicated problem to solve, which is managing your full stack. We have one solution for that, which is full stack observability. And so if you use full stack observability, this is part of it and there's no additional charge.
Fantastic. Hey, man, this sounds great. I'm glad, you know what? The story continues. It looks like you're making real progress here. But the good news is your success is all of our success. It makes everyone's life easier. As we continue, 2020 was such a big year for observability, in spite of everything with COVID and everything. It looks like 2021 is continuing. So that's great. Buddy, thanks for coming on today and sharing with us.
Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate the time. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. This is Buddy Brewer from New Relic telling us about the latest innovations coming out of New Relic. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be back in a moment with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Hey, thanks, buddy. Great stuff there. Next up, we have Mike Jones on the Haunted Hacker video. This is part one of a two-part series. You know, we continue to have Mike's Haunted Hacker on here. This is, as I say, part one. Let's now go to Mike Jones and the Haunted Hacker.
So in news today, I haven't really been banging on the news feeds. This week has been pretty busy for me. I've had a couple of speaking engagements and some board meetings, so I've been kind of swamped. What I do find really peculiar is they asked me last year, when the lockdown started, what do you see being one of the biggest issues for security going forward, working from home? And hands down, I said VPN. VPN is going to be a big target. So critical flaws were reported in Cisco VPN February 5th. So they've rolled out fixes for multiple critical vulnerabilities. So I would expect to see that kind of on a constant basis, probably a lot more often than what we're seeing now. And then, of course, you have the Chrome browser 0 day that Chrome is trying to catch up with. And it really just gets kind of slow. You have critical bugs found in popular Realtek Wi-Fi module for embedded devices, which is kind of disturbing for me because some of the boards for Raspberry Pis, they use Broadcom, but Realtek is also another chipset that they like to use. So maybe be careful when you're buying a Raspberry Pi, make sure it has the Broadcom adapter instead of the Realtek. Anyways, other than that, let's see, calendar-wise, I have the 4th and 5th of March booked for Cybersecurity 2021 being put on by Media Ops and Security Boulevard, who also picks up our podcast. And that's going to be working from your haunted house, basically taking people through a guided tour of exploiting everything in their home, in their office, and their kids' gaming systems and whatnot. So then that's free. I'll post a link to that in the Discord and on social media. Other than that, nothing like huge. It's been kind of a quiet week, which is usually can be a good and a bad sign as to what's to come. There's going to be a launch coming up pretty soon of a platform called Jenny. I know Drew knows what that is as well. But a friend of mine named Tanesh runs a company, and we had a meeting, and it's going to go live very shortly. So look for good things from Jenny. Jenny basically is a platform that you can put in the type of cybersecurity service you need, and Jenny will tell you all the big players, and here's their data, here's some screen scrapes and videos, and here's how we rank them among the other 5 million cybersecurity providers. So it's a way to sift through all the nonsense and whatnot. Anyway, so let's get started. So if Cham and Drew and Trammy can open their video and the microphones, we'll be good.
Hello.
Hey, what's up, Drew? How are you, buddy?
Really good, really good.
Good. Good to see you, man. So
Going, Drew.
So tonight
Can you guys
is,
hear me?
Yeah.
Hello, yes.
Perfect. So tonight is Cham's first night as co-host. So look for more of this to come with Trammy and Cham, Kristen, Ryan. We're going to be sharing the duties of hosting because nobody wants to hear me drone on forever and ever. So it's time to bring some new people into it.
Yes, we do, Mike. We do.
So Drew, man, it's really awesome to connect with you again. I think how I came into your circle was through Ryan King.
Our sales director, Ryan, I think there's an introduction there. I think we did technically actually meet many years at an ISSA event. But yes, Ryan's been good in introducing us over more recent times.
Yeah. Yeah, he's pretty good. And the ISSA event was very interesting. I think that was the first time I had given a live talk on a boat, like an actual boat on water. So only in the Thames. Yeah, for sure. So Drew, talk to me a little bit about who you are, introduce yourself, the company you're with, and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So Drew Perry, CEO of Tiberium. We are a managed security services provider, and we are on a mission to automate as much cyber operations as possible. So I've been, onboarding customers to what I call traditional MSSPs for at least a decade or so now. And maybe in a bit, we'll talk about more of kind of where I've started out in this industry and that side of things. But spent a lot of time doing this sort of onboarding process, getting customers from, big banks, governments, law firms, all sorts, big and small, trying to outsource their SOC services, get them onto platforms. And it's just been slow, it's clunky, you get false positives, problems. So with Tiberium, we originally started out as more of a traditional consultancy and reseller. And about a year ago, we shifted into managed security services because I saw, all these problems, and I thought, well, we can fix that, or I can fix that with our team. So we're focusing on automating the onboarding process, speeding that up rapidly from a traditional 6-month process where you develop parsers, connectors, get your logs in, develop use cases, all that boring stuff, problematic stuff, and speeding it up into as slick a process as possible by using bots, by using ARM templates, by using scripts, by using things that have been in place for quite some time, but no one's really pieced them together and kind of run with it in that way. So we speed up that process and then use the power of sort of cloud native technologies and automation to free up our analysts, to free them up to not have to do sort of traditional L1 tasks, L2 tasks, get some, logic app, get some scripts in there to get the context, get enrichment, do all that fun stuff, so they can be freed up to do the important things, which is actual threat hunting, actually detecting compromise in our customers' environments. So that's our core service. But at the end of the day, we also do a lot of other bread and butter stuff as well. So traditional pen testing, red teaming, social engineering, the stuff that keeps us in the game and keeps it interesting instead of pure blue team. So that's kind of us in a nutshell.
Cool. That's awesome.
I've got a question.
Go ahead, Trami.
Right.
All right. So, Drew, you mentioned that you're shortening that onboarding process, which used to take 6 months, right? And you're
not always, but often. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, you're taking a 6-month process and leveraging automation. How much are you reducing that time? So you said it's drastic. So are you bringing that down to like a month, from 6 months down to a month?
Well, it depends on if you could say a full live service, but we've taken that 6-month process down to 6 minutes.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
No, that's just marketing speak. That's a bit crazy. Technically, we can roll out a SIEM platform. We use Azure Sentinel and quite a lot of the Microsoft stack, and we can roll that out with our CI/CD DevOps pipeline in about 6 minutes. But yeah, the reality is it's probably days instead of 6 months, to actually then turn on all the right connectors, get the right log sources in, do a little bit of tuning, and actually start being able to do your threat hunting with a decent data set to, at least validate the integrity of a customer environment very quickly.
Right.
But yeah, it's nowhere near the traditional 6 months, because one most important thing is we're not having to sit there and develop parsers for everything under the sun. Our technology and platforms that we use is leveraging the good work of still legacy vendors like ArcSight and Splunk and all of that, where everything's in common event format for on-prem, or for any cloud log sources. It's just APIs these days. So it's just click, 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 done. Or actually not even click, run the script, done. So that's the focus there for that onboarding process.
Gotcha.
Speed is essential, because why wait? You can't wait months and months.
Exactly, right. Especially you're taking something from 6 months down to the days. So that's super impressive. So you're leveraging a lot of automation. Tell me, what process of that does the automation kind of save time, and what do people in your company actually focus on? So you're automating a lot of that.
Yeah, so we've got 2 core areas of the business from the technical side. So one is on build and research and development. So constantly pushing the service forward. As I've already said their name enough times, Microsoft partner, we're sort of pushing the boundaries of what you can do across their stack and pulling all that together. So we've got the build area of the business, constantly developing new scripts, new techniques, new ways of speeding other things up to be even faster. And then we're building out the pure threat hunting side. So the proactive side, the not sitting there waiting for an alert, actually looking for badness. And those are kind of the 2 core areas that we're going with. So not the traditional model of, junior analysts and that side. It's pure research, development, build, and experienced threat hunters.
So let's talk about threat hunting really quick. When you say that it frees up the analysts to do more of the threat hunting, are we talking just like the basic threat hunting, or are we going weeds deep into systems and log files? And
it depends. It depends on, one, the maturity of the environment we're working with, and 2, if the engaged with us in incident response mode, because we also get involved, post incident detection to step in, do the forensics, do the threat hunting where maybe there's been attribution. So maybe we know something about who's in the environment through our threat intelligence sources or through their blatant mistakes. So it really depends. So there's that piece, and then there's the responding to, vulnerabilities or the latest threat actors, TTPs or whatever, and just validating environments that way. So there's, again, the two arcs for that side as well.
Gotcha. So threat intelligence feeds, you guys provide your own threat intelligence feed, or do you suggest third party?
Feeds are not the best. I would avoid using the term feeds. We use MISP as one of our open source sort of tip platforms. And then we've got a number of different feeds, as we call it there, into there. But we've got a few other partners and sort of, there's the government feeds and then there's the private feeds as well that we receive for that. But it's more around attacker techniques and staying on top of that to not rely on, indicators of compromise and that stuff with a very short half-life for that. By the time you try and search for it in your environment, it's been burnt and the attackers have moved on to new infrastructure. So why bother hunting for that?
Yeah, the hash always changes. So, it's hard to keep track of that, especially when you're dealing with like five, commands or five networks and then chasing down one hash that changes every 24 hours on those.
Yeah, or even, stuff on the domain side with DGA type, constant shifting there. So, I mean, why burn our cycles hunting for, indicators where we could look for actual behaviors in an environment? Like, why is this user all of a sudden logging into these machines with this token or whatever? There's a big focus these days on threat actor groups and I don't want to say it because everyone keeps talking about, like SolarWinds and all the Minecraft stuff and all that. Everyone's going after APIs. Everyone's going after tokens. Everyone's going after privileged accounts. Yeah. So it's really the behavior of those accounts that we're looking for within the environment.
Yeah, and I mean, attackers have gotten to the point where if they really want to conduct like a serious APT, you're probably not going to detect them for a while. So, looking for those 0 days or those IOCs usually is kind of monotonous and usually doesn't bring up any new actionable intelligence. It's mostly, this happened in, 2 years ago. What have we done to patch it up?
So what we try and do is we use the term, we're trying to force the attacker's hand. So we harden our customer environments as much as we can, along good GPOs, locking things down, all those fundamentals, patching, stuff that's actually not easy to do always. So we go through that during our onboarding process with our customers, lock everything down as much as possible. So then you're forcing the hand of the attacker, if they're in the environment, to maybe use some techniques that are a bit more noisy to increase your likelihood of detection. And that's kind of our methodology there.
Kind of smoke them out of the holes, really. And I've seen it on a couple levels. So have you guys interfaced with many companies who have AI already in the network, like let's say a Darktrace platform or?
I've got pretty strong views around Darktrace because I've come across them years ago.
Let's go there.
Yeah, okay. Years ago, and I will admit I have not used it in about 12 months or so, but it used to be too noisy and it used to produce alerts where it would constantly be tuned down. And you would end up with something at the end where you couldn't explain the exact reasons behind it. And there wasn't that visibility of why this alert's fired. The context was missing. And it would be tuned so far down that you wouldn't get anything valuable out of it. That might have changed. I don't know. But yeah, AI stuff, I don't know. We talk about automation and AI, but really we're just dealing with scripts automation. And logic.
So I have my own thoughts about AI. I wish they would stop using the term artificial intelligence because it's not really true AI. But what I found with like deploying AI like in a network and then coming back behind it and trying to correlate everything, whether it be, funneling logs into an API or trying to pull things into something like, Darktrace, really you're limited to, like, let's say you want to get good data from a network. You're really limited to how that network functions now. When you go and drop AI into it, guess what? All the bad actors and all the misbehavior going on seems normal. So we're just going to go with that. That's kind of what I was curious if you'd ran into anything like that may have set you back as far as like a challenge to really get the environment to produce actionable stuff.
Well, yeah, no, because we're not putting in that type of AI. I mean, as far as we'd take it would be across, so with Sentinel, Defender, those types of technologies, you've got the fusion capability there, where it's looking across multiple alert sources. It's classic correlation at the end of the day, but with a few more chains in the process. And Microsoft try and call that AI, but really that, again, is just correlation. Where we are looking to use what I would almost start to call AI is around using GPT-3. So we are part of the beta program for that with OpenAI, and we're using that as part of our sort of chatbots and our interaction side for that, like our NLP language type interactions. But what we're discovering with it is we can't use that it's obvious you can't use that for real-time anything because it's trained on a data set pre-2017. So that's as close as we're getting to AI type stuff at this point, beyond marketing terms of what is traditionally scripts, automation, logic, and that type of thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at when I think of true AI, I think of Bayes' algorithm, right? The predictive analysis based on previous behaviors and a pattern. But not a lot of companies actually employ that. Even some of the big AI companies don't really have that algorithm understood or implemented correctly. They implement parts of it, but not the entire algorithm, which it's really not true AI. So going back to your journey, I'm sure you get asked this as many times as I do. Take us back to when you got into cybersecurity and what made you go that direction. I know we have a lot of new people on. We have a couple lecturers from a university, so that kind of information would be totally useful. Yeah, I mean, it depends how far back you want to go. I mean, we could go. You take us. We could go all the way back to 1989. When I got my first Amiga 500. Let's go
back to 1989.
My parents, I think they read an article in the local newspaper. So I'm from a small New Zealand town called Wanganui. It was home to the Wanganui supercomputer, which was the country's first attempt at building a national crime database. So that was a collaboration of IBM and the New Zealand police. And they built this giant centre there, which attracted quite a lot of sort of talent to do with the local polytechnic and all of that, which is pretty cool. And I think there were these advertisements saying, get this, come do this course. My parents saw this and were like, okay, well, we've got a 3-year-old and these computer things are going to be something about the future. At the end of that, they took this course and we got an Amiga 500 and I got onto that. And that's where it kind of all began. And what was cool is locally, there was quite a large sort of bulletin board community. There was a lot of freaks around that mostly all got arrested at the end of the day. But there was interesting knowledge about. So I don't know exactly where the path from pure computer interest in IT would have diverged off onto the cybersecurity side. But yeah, that was kind of the seed of it all. So go down that path. Had the Amigas, got a like a 486 with Windows on it, all that, and then this guy came around and he put Red Hat on my 486, and I was like, right, I've got Linux. This is awesome.
How long did that take?
There was at least, how many disks? I don't know how many disks we had to go through to install that, but it would have taken quite some time. And then I was reading all this stuff about having to track down getting a shell, and you have to get a shell to do hacking. And I was like, how do I get a shell? And I didn't realize all this time I had Bash, I had Red Hat, I had a shell. And all I had to do was with my modem then start dialing into places. So, we'd use things like Hyperterminal and all that to dial into each other's machines. That was great. We'd start transferring files around. And then from there, I just really got into like file sharing and collecting and downloading and all of that, and sort of varied off into the piracy world. And in New Zealand at the time, you couldn't get content because there was one large telco, which was a monopoly. No one had internet, and it was a struggle. So we used to start building networks. So obviously, if you can't get it, you'd build it yourself. So we started running cables to, neighbors' houses. We started doing all of that. And then I kind of built this network and was hosting this file sharing service on there, which was based on DC++ back in the day. And I got to this point, and I was probably about 14 by now. And I was like, right, I need faster internet. So I ended up moving to a city purely to get to Wellington to get fast internet, so I could host this server and grow it and expand it and download more, and all that turned into, we would have wars with other competing groups where we would have to protect and defend our server and all that. And I learned a lot of, back then it was traditional DDoS stuff and all that. And I thought, okay, well, I need to do some studying. I need to get a job. So I did a diploma in network engineering, which I never finished because I went the traditional path of certifications. So N+, A+, MCSA, CCNA, all of that. Did some job experience with a local IT company. First job I remember being tasked with on my first day when I was 17, I think, was this server here. It runs Linux. It's got 2 CPUs in it, and we need to get an SMP kernel running on it so it can take advantage of it. I was like, great, okay, cool, I can do that. And 6 months into that, or a year into that, I ended up getting a job in a security operations center for Unisys, and it was the first security operations center in the Southern Hemisphere. So from there, that's where my actual cybersecurity career started, with that sort of analyst view in a SOC, and then going from there. And from there, ventured into, red team, blue team, social engineering, a lot of that. And at the same time, doing all the traditional hacking stuff like on ICQ and sending each other files and getting people's IPs through Telnet because everyone was on modems then. And it was just, I'm in. I want to learn as much as possible. What can I do? It was a very interesting time.
Yeah, it's I look back at those times and there was no laws regarding cybercrime. So really, if they just didn't like you, they could take you to jail.
You did. You got into the wrong place at the wrong time, and back then, that's the first thing I learned was people reuse passwords, and everyone who was on this network that I ran, because we could do a lot of sort of layer 2 type attacks, man in the middles, that type of thing. We could intercept a lot. So therefore we had a lot of visibility. We could collect everyone's passwords, and then everyone who was on this, some of them were in some pretty interesting positions and interesting companies, and they reuse their passwords. So then you get onto the router of the place where they work, and then from there you set up a GRE tunnel back to you. You can do man in the middle, and on and so forth. Yeah. So those are the days.
For real. Now technology makes it really easy because you have like the Netgear VPN routers that people are putting in small businesses that they leave the VPN completely wide open and don't change password. You go and set up your own VPN tunnel and welcome to the company.
You're in.
You're in.
Here's our onboarding process.
Right. I think our journeys probably started somewhere around the same time frame. Listen to the BBS stories. I definitely remember playing with BBSs and getting my hand smacked for it. But it was a lot of fun, just to hear the tones and then see the response on the monitor that you're actually getting a prompt was my rush. That's what started the rush of all rushes. And then you start talking about shell code and reverse shells, and that brings on a completely different.
I think the biggest rush was, you get on, you're chatting with someone, and then, you could run Winnuke and just knock them offline. And you see them drop offline, you're like, yes, I'm a god. So lame, but yet so fun.
Yes, absolutely. And IRC, like the bots and egg drops and net splits. And, if you could cause a net split, knock everybody off the IRC channel, that was pretty big back in the day. So anybody have any questions for Drew? Cham went to Westminster University and majored in cybersecurity and is super sharp. And she kind of represents our people coming into the industry and knows a lot of the lecturers in London. And we've had a couple of ventures ourselves as far as like companies and services and stuff like that over in Scotland and London. So Cham, do you have any questions for Drew or comments?
No.
No? Okay.
I'll just point one thing out in the chat there that Ryan's put up about the Wanganui Computer Centre bombing.
Yeah.
So that was the only case in New Zealand's history of a suicide bomber. So that was in direct response to the computer centre police crime database, where a local anarchist punk disagreed with the fact that this centre was there, and strapped some explosives to his chest, went outside it, and damaged the entranceway, but also ended his life. But yeah, it's the only case in New Zealand's history, which is crazy.
we had one, I guess it was Christmas Day in Nashville, in front of the AT&T switching center in Nashville. And what happened was a guy was like conspiracy theorist, 5G, thought 5G was going to kill everybody, so decided to blow up the entire switching center, which caused mass damage for broadband and cellular. And it's another one of those crazy events, but I don't think we'll see the end of it with all these kooks out there thinking 5G is the end of the world. So that and pandemic and all that good stuff. So Trami, what do you have as far as Tiberium and Drew and
I've got some questions. Don't you worry. So Drew, you kind of told us about your background in cybersecurity. So tell me about Tiberium. Like, how did you get it started? What was it like? What were some of the struggles that you ran into starting your own company?
Yeah, so as I said, we started off originally as a pure consultative-led business. So it was mostly myself delivering the consultancy services. The struggles with that is scalability. So you only have so many hours in a day, and you can only get support from so many contractors and people around you without, growing in a sense of either getting funding or doing it with others. So this is the difference now, where I now have, a dedicated team around me. We've recently taken on investment. We have a new board of directors who have experience in sort of growing and scaling and running managed security services. But yeah, the traditional struggles were just around the hours in the day. But what I loved about that was the variation of the type of work that I was getting exposed to, and my small team back a few years ago was getting exposed to. So we got to do some very, very interesting sort of incident response engagements where we're dealing with some very sophisticated attackers and some very high profile companies. That was great. We've done some very interesting sort of social engineering engagements where I'm lucky enough to be able to sneak into places and do those kind of hybrid attacks where you're putting in devices physically to try and compromise that way. But yeah, we got to a point where all that was well, good and fun. But, my real passion was actually helping companies sort of more protect themselves and be able to detect and respond more rapidly. So hence the sort of shift to more managed services approaches. And yeah, we've had the service up and running since early last year. But yeah, challenges, it's been an interesting time because we talk about our onboarding process being sped up and our response capabilities sped up because we've built some interesting integrations where we can do stuff with sort of the click of the button. Sure. But also the cycle of our customers' needs, they're happening much faster with, the world we're working in, the death of the perimeter, all that stuff. Those are the challenges. How are we dealing with these rapidly evolving sort of cloud environments with stuff constantly changing there, which actually makes it more exciting. But yeah, it's finding the support and getting the right people around you. And when you have the right people around you, it's all go.
It's a lot easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you go in and assess a client's current SOC infrastructure and advise how to make it better, or maybe even try to lift some of that responsibility?
Yeah, both. So we either work with companies that don't have a SOC and we become their SOC, or if they do, exactly that. So we review, we augment, and then we enhance. So we add on our capability to either act as an escalation sort of partner for that pure incident response, or we review mostly SOC environments that are using those legacy logging platforms. You know, the Splunks, the ArcSights, the Logrithm. I won't name too many technologies, but, you know, the ones that need a lot more feeding and watering and a lot more highly skilled engineers to run, because they're not sort of cloud native, that type of thing. But yeah, if a customer does have a SOC, yes, we step in with our long, decade of experience in that space to enhance it as much as possible.
Do you find it more challenging to onboard a customer that already has a SOC team, or one that's still small and doesn't have anything? So, it is more challenging because it comes with some inherent, the mindset of what it should or could be, what it is. They don't necessarily know what it could be. It's been either really bad or problematic. Some environments we go into and it's great. They're incredibly mature. They've got great detection and response capability, and they just need that helping hand to maybe get some of their cloud log sources, some visibility there. But yeah, it is easier, I guess, less challenging going into sort of greenfield environments. Those smaller customers that have not had access to this level of capability before. That's the more exciting piece.
Yeah, that's a big piece. So one question I had, as far as, augmenting SOCs and maybe taking that pressure off of people, goes back to education and goes back to the job market, right? So you're automating the level 1, level 2 functions to make things easier for companies. Are you also finding a way to take those level 1 and level 2 responsibilities from that SOC and maybe provide that level 1, level 2 opportunity to somebody from the outside trying to get into cybersecurity? Yeah,
absolutely. So we're taking what we would traditionally hire in that space and saying, okay, where are your real interests? Is it in development? Is it in scripting? Is it in improving automations? Is it building bots? It's just a shift of, I'm not going to hire someone to sit there and look at a screen and look at tickets and close out alerts.
Right.
You're going to be hired to maybe look at that and go, how can I automate that? How can I do something more interesting with this? So it's just shifting the talent to focus on other areas instead of wasting humans' skills and creativity and focus, and focusing it in these other more productive areas.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen like some of the other podcasts where I talk about how we don't have a real talent gap. There's no talent shortage. It's just the way that we're hiring for positions, I think, and the way that we're positioning people within companies that maybe might not be as adequate or streamlined as possible. But you brought up a really good point that, and I haven't heard any other company say this, is that when they take responsibilities away from company A to give them more focus on the more important things, those people or those positions take that and roll that over into something functional for your own company and put that back out there. To me, that's a huge way of giving back, because it seems that in our industry right now, we have a whole lot of mid-level jobs that they're calling entry level, but you have to have 5 years experience and know like 500 different principles, which someone getting into industry does not know.
Yeah.
So I applaud you guys for taking that and looking at that from like, a newcomer's point of view and putting that back out there, because I think the more jobs we can put back out for those creative minds, the better our companies will be.
I think it's also focusing on, I look at myself and I go, okay, I never finished my diploma. I never went to university. I did these certs and I thrived because of my passion for what I was doing. I just love it. It's what I do. Yep. So I'm looking for anyone who is genuinely really excited by this stuff and really passionate about it, or shows any form of interest, and they're in. That's the main thing. Who cares about experience? Who cares about what certs you have now or anything like that? Yeah. If you're creative, interested, and want to do it, then
I know.
Yeah.
I know quite a few people I could send your way that, when you have opportunities, let me know, because I know some talented people that are really struggling because the market is so top heavy right now. So let's go to questions really quick. Johnny,
yeah, Ryan had a great question that I saw. And I was going to say, so he had a question about how do you stay competitive in terms of like what you offer in the market? Because there's about 150,000 MSPs and MSSPs out there in the global market. So what are some things that you guys are doing to set some of your services apart? And I have a feeling automation is going to be part of that answer.
That's the differentiator. It's the speed. And not only that, it's our approach to our service and collaborating. So we're not, I keep doing this every time I do it on a call, we're not at arm's length. We're not at arm's length MSSP. We're not sitting there at a distance, sending you an email, sending you a PDF report. We integrate into your team and collaborate. And we use, collaboration tools like Slack and Teams and that to really be part of your existing team. That's you wouldn't think that's the unique differentiator, but actually it is, because MSSPs have this model of, we'll just send this alert to them, they'll deal with it. But when we're part of their team and we've got that trust there, that works very, very well. You say, there's this huge amount of MSPs out there, but MSPs, a lot of them are like, okay, we'll jump on this new, we'll jump on Azure Sentinel and start offering a security service around that. But you can't just jump into it and do it. You don't have the experience of the threat hunting skills, so they don't have the experience of knowing the world of cyber. They know the MSP market. So then the MSPs come to us and we partner with MSPs to go, okay, well, we'll do that service for you. But yeah, in the MSSP world, it's really just our collaborative approach, the automation approach, and the focus on actual proactive threat hunting versus flooding false positives, flooding alerts, and not taking that responsibility to be part of your customer's team, really.
Gotcha.
So there was another question that popped up. I wanted to ask really quick because this is pretty pertinent. Colin asked, what are some interesting experiences that you've had running your own business? Also, what made you decide it's time to start my own business? Or was it even a thought?
It wasn't. Well, so since Tiberium's been around for a number of years and the other models of consultancy, the original starting point was just to be able to get those new experiences, have an opportunity to build and create something and eventually get a team around me, which I'm lucky enough to have. But I think I've always wanted to go down that path of creating something. I've never been of the mindset of, wanting to really work in a big company or do anything like that. It's always, it was that original contractor mindset. I'm getting around, I'm getting the experiences because that's, stimulating enough to keep you excited, to keep things interested, because you find yourself in situations where you'd never think you'd be in, somewhere in the Middle East dealing with this, or somewhere in a bunker somewhere doing that. And, that's the piece. And when you're building a business and running, a consultancy company, you pick and choose those very interesting customers and opportunities. So you have that freedom with you for that. And that's more the driving force, to have that freedom to choose the interesting work at the end of the day.
And it's either feast or famine too in consulting. So I had to find ways to augment what I was doing with like speaking engagements and write-ups and stuff like that. But you're right. I mean, I've worked for the big 500s and the big companies, but there's no more like fulfillment, true fulfillment, as to when like you have an idea and it becomes something that makes you money. And
I mean, money's good, but the reality is I would still be doing stuff if that didn't come. But it is bizarre. I sit here and I'm like, okay, so Tiberium, we haven't technically launched our managed service yet. So we're a couple of weeks away from that. We are actually on the Jenny platform that you mentioned, Tanesh. We've been working with him on there, which has been great.
Fantastic.
But we technically have not launched yet. But so far, having this, new team, new people, the support, that's the most exciting bit. I'd encourage anyone either go down the contracting path and start there and build up that skill set and build up those experiences, run with that, or just start something, start building your idea.
Research,
Once you see it becoming real, it's quite amazing.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the team that you built? Because I know starting out your own company is really tough when you've got a small team and then you got to figure out how to scale. So tell us a little bit about how you went about, finding talent and building out your team.
Well, we're still going through that process. So we haven't fully built out the team yet. We're working on it. But the talent that we have found are absolutely amazing. The people are so passionate. They just love what they do. And that's the first thing. As soon as we speak to anyone, I can tell within 10 seconds of speaking to someone if they're the right fit, if they're the right mindset.
Okay, tell me how you can tell within 10 seconds.
Oh, how? I don't know. It's just the way they talk about things. It's just the way.
It's the passion.
Sorry?
It's the passion. I mean, you can tell when you run into somebody, like when they start telling you about their career, you can tell if they're passionate about what they do, or they could give fuck all about what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have that conversation, you share a couple of little bits where you go, this is what we're doing. And you see where their eyes light up and you see what words trigger that. And then you press on that a bit more. And then you discover, yes, they have some really impressive skills in those areas. And then, you might do a little technical test, but actually most of the time that's not necessary because you can really tell when someone knows what they're talking about.
Right.
I guess, you just kind of know if someone's bullshitting at the end of the day.
Right. Well, how do you build trust with the team that you have, right? So according to a 2020 Insider Threat Report, companies in North America, I don't know about the UK, but they say that the most that North America suffers the most from insider threats. So how do you go about building that trust culture at your company? And how do you know who to trust when you're bringing on new team members?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I mean, we're small enough now. We're small enough now to have that trusted small network, and the rest of the team I'm working with from the board and directors, I've worked with them for 10 years. So that trust has been established over long periods of time of multiple experiences. The new team members coming on board, good question. I guess time will tell. No. But as I said, it's that passion. I mean, you have to work on some shared experiences to build that trust level. And when someone comes on board and they, start building cool stuff and they start producing interesting things, for me, that trust level's there because they've delivered on what they said. They are actually interested in this. They are actually creating these things. And from there, I'm all good. We're not going to get into, insider threat, monitoring people, all that. Nah, we're too small for that. But, in a big company, that is a challenge. Mike, I know your background and how trust can be abused and used in ways to get into interesting places. So
yes, very true. Very true. Not only that, but I mean, if you treat your employees like people, you don't have to worry about all the other nonsense because they're not going to be excluded. They're not going to feel like they're working on an island. My biggest thing with a SOC, and people will disagree, managed service providers will definitely disagree, but as far as SOCs go, it gives you it's like a security blanket, right? Yeah, we can see the alerts on the screen. Yeah, we have analysts that will call the CISO and say, hey, look, we're under attack. But what it all boils down to, it's a staff to react to a situation. IPS really failed us as an industry. We thought that was going to be the cure-all.
It broke the trust.
Total shit.
Positive rates.
Total shit. So throw that away. Next thing comes along, AI. Oh, this is a promised land. Book of Elijah. It didn't happen yet. We're still waiting for that to explode. So there's a lot of failed technology and a lot of failed principles. But one thing that doesn't fail, even over a period of time with IDSs, IPSs, AI, is the people in the chairs. And to me, that's most important. So we could do away with a SOC on a national level and still get the same type of coverage if we had people that worked the shift work that weren't necessarily SOC analysts, but people who cared about what they did and had a passion. So I've seen that a million times, just like the military, right? So when I went to the military, I went for a specific purpose. I went because I wanted to be intelligence. I wanted that access. I wanted to do something. But then you get the majority of the kids who went in after high school who just did it for a paycheck. And that's no different in any industry. We're seeing people, especially vendors and recruiters, promise, oh, we can give you this amount of money and you can drive this type of car. I believe that one of the interventions that I did, one of the questions was, what kind of car do you drive? Champ, can you remember that? It was a car question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were asking me what kind of car I drove. So to them, it wasn't about turning life around and making different choices. It was about money and how much can I get? So, I mean, if we make ourselves like people persons and try to like connect with our employees in SOC, I think automation will take care of 90% of the problem. The other 10% is going to be your analyst and be able to trust them and connect with them.
Because so they can step in when things do go wrong with actual useful advice and actually be able to deal with it and actually help.
Yeah. Not just some ambiguous alert on Darktrace that says, check port 443. It does nothing.
Yeah.
So automation is great. I use a lot of automation when it comes to like auto exploit, using mass scan scripting with HP screenshot to kind of get an idea what I'm hitting. But a lot of people they confuse machine learning, AI, and automation. They think that we're trying to take over all of pen testing, so there will be no need for pen testers. That's the biggest fear. And I see Trammy's nodding her head, so I'm sure that Vanahai has had their questions about, are you trying to eliminate pen testers?
Yeah.
Are you trying to eliminate a SOC maybe and like bring it into a bigger house, a more protected house?
Hey, Mike, that was great. I like this Haunted Hacker Show, guys. If you've been following it, we ran a bunch of other, what we do is we take Mike's whole show and we break it into parts. Go check it out. It's on digitalanarchist.com if you're interested. Also, Mike will be speaking at our Cybersecurity Summit coming up in early March. So don't miss that. It's just about 3 or 4 weeks away. You can get to it at MediaOpsEvents.com. All right. Now it's time for Charlene O'Hanlon. Actually, it's not time for Charlene O'Hanlon. It's actually time for something old. We're going to be going over to Predict, which was just last month, and we're happy to have Anna Margarita Medina, chaos engineer at Gremlin, who's going to tell us why 2021 is the year to adopt chaos engineering. Here now is Anna Margarita Medina.
If 2020 has taught us anything, is that we have to be prepared for whatever this chaotic world might throw our way. My name's Ana Margarita Medina. I'm a senior chaos engineer at Gremlin. Thank you, Media Ops, for putting together Predict 2021. I am very excited to talk about 2021 being the year to adopt chaos engineering. We all might be familiar with this, this pager goes off, we have to wake up, we have to go ahead and just fix it. If your 2020 was very similar to mine, it felt like everything was on fire constantly, whether it was the world news, the US news, COVID, how countries responded to the pandemic, it just felt like an endless pager going off. But when we met to our systems, they always kept going down. I know a lot of my favorite tools kept having large outages, so hashtag hugops to a lot of them. And as an SRE, every single day, there was something that was going on that meant that we weren't prepared for this pandemic. A lot of our organizations were making the switch to allowing capacity to sustain the amount of users that they were having on a daily basis. We weren't expecting a pandemic to hit us in 2020. And when we talk about outages, not only are they expensive, but they're really damaging to our brand. When we take a look at social media, we can just look that everyone just is saying we're relying on the internet, but a lot of my favorite applications are going down. These days, every company has some sort of online footprint. With that evolution comes with the stringent expectations for online services. Every single one of our customers is wanting an amazing experience 24/7, 365 days a week. And what they don't get is they go ahead and just make sure that everyone on Twitter knows about it. Failures are becoming so much more visible, and they need us to be really scrutiny from the public. So how do we go in making that better? We go ahead and we focus on making sure that we're constantly keeping our systems alive. And when all of our pages start going off in 2021, this is that inflection point. Complexity has grown at such a rapid rate that we need to make sure that we stay ahead of that curve. Reliability needs to be a priority for us now and as we continue to grow. This is the time to focus on reliability together to get it under control. It's a tough fact to face, but our software has been breaking over and over again. And as 2020 taught us, we can continue to rely on these systems and this brittle technology. Our business, health, and safety rely on these applications or systems that will fail. Failure is inevitable. And when we bring it back to the forefront of 2021, this is the year to start focusing in chaos engineering if your organization has not started to. And if you think that's just my personal opinion, when we head on over to the CNCF that focuses on cloud native technologies, Liz Rice, one of the TOCs for CNCF, is sharing that in the technologies to be watching in 2021, chaos engineering is one of those 5. So if you're thinking about getting started with chaos engineering, it sounds like you're not the only one that's having those questions. Go ahead and read up on it. Try to understand how to adopt this practice. For those that are listening that have never heard of chaos Chaos engineering is thoughtful, planned experiments designed to reveal the weakness in our systems. This is not about unexpected failures affecting your systems. This is not about breaking production on purpose just because. This is about finding those weak points in our systems to make them more reliable. And as we go through today's talk, I'm going to be touching base on some terminology and processes that chaos engineering uses. Some of those terminologies goes back to the scientific method. We go ahead and we use a scientific method to approach chaos engineering in the same scientific and fun way. An experiment is going to be made up of a hypothesis, data, and we are always going to come together and observe and share results. With that hypothesis, you want to ask yourself, if I inject something into my system, what do I expect to happen? Because chaos engineering does need some guardrails, we go ahead and we define what an experiment is going to be attacking. We do that by defining a blast radius, where is it that we're targeting, and a magnitude, how intense, how big is the impact of our experiment. And because we really need to be thoughtful about what we're injecting, we go ahead and we think about abort conditions. What is going to cause for me to stop this experiment? I mentioned the scientific method, and if some of y'all can't remember it from grade school or anything like it, let's go ahead and look at what that looks like for chaos engineering. We start by observing our systems. We start looking at the metrics that let us know how our system is behaving on normal day-to-day conditions. This is where you can go ahead and also start setting some service level objectives, some service level indicators for each of your services. We go ahead and form the hypothesis and define what is going to cause for us to stop that experiment. We can go ahead and now define a blast radius and a magnitude of the experiment. Let's say I want to inject a CPU increase of 10% into just 2 of my hosts. We go ahead and we run this experiment. We analyze those results. How did my system behave under these conditions is what you want to be asking. You expand that scope if your experiment has been successful, but if your experiment was unsuccessful when you hit one of those abort conditions, go ahead and just retest it and put in those fixes into your systems as you go along. And at the end of the day, make sure to be sharing the results of each chaos engineering experiment, whether it's with your teammates, whether it's with your upper leadership, or it might just be with the technology community on its own. When you're looking to adopt something like chaos engineering, a lot of folks might ask questions. And one of those questions might be, why should I do this? What are some of those advantages? And well, the cost of downtime is one of the easier ways to answer this. Downtime is extremely expensive, and this comes into 3 different buckets where the costs go. During an outage, you can see that you're having a revenue loss, but your employee productivity is also going down. Instead of the engineers working on features, they're going to focus on firefighting. After the outage, you might have some service level agreements that your company or organization may have breached, and those go back into a customer chargeback. If you're in a heavily regulated industry, this also might mean that you have some fines based on some laws that might be available in your country around your industry. And we have a bigger bucket that is very unquantifiable. We have, going back to those earlier slides, where your brand gets affected by folks going on social media, the news picking up those headlines, you are suffering some costs based on that. And based on employee satisfaction and employees working through these outages, you might think that everything is fine, but employee attrition is going to be suffering if your engineers are constantly firefighting and working on incidents versus being there for what they came in. And that means to scale out systems, to improve your applications and processes. And the average company loses around $300,000 per hour that they're down. And this doesn't relate into any high traffic event or any of those big events that mean that your more customers are on your website. So just something to keep in mind. And let me reintroduce myself. My name is Ana Margarita Medina. I'm a senior chaos engineer at Gremlin. I've been writing code since 2007, gotten a chance to work on front-end technologies, back-end, and mobile applications. And I later transitioned to site reliability engineering in 2016 with a focus in chaos engineering. I also love breaking the stigma around mental health and being a representation for a lot of minorities. I was born and raised in Costa Rica and Nicaragua, and I strongly believe if you can't see it, you can't be it. So just making sure to give a shout out to my Latinx folks in tech. Going back to the topic of chaos engineering, when we look at chaos engineering, there's various levels of the stack that you can target. We're going to talk about some of those today. You can focus on resource level failures within your services, make sure that you're testing those dependencies. You could be injecting some chaos engineering on your application, and you want to make sure that you spend some time thinking about automating these processes to do chaos engineering in a continuous way. One of the first ways that you can actually adopt chaos engineering is to use this as a way to validate monitoring. One of those examples is just running a CPU experiment, running a memory spike, just running a small spike to make sure that your dashboards are set up properly. And you want to do this prior to an outage to make sure that your engineers have the proper resources when that pager goes off. So let's say that I inject a 50% increase on my systems, just 50% of those systems, and that abort condition is going to be that my application is not responsive. My hypothesis is when I inject the CPU increase, I expect to see that on my monitoring dashboard. That's just a very simple experiment to adopt. If your environment is something like Kubernetes, you can also just make sure that you're handling resources properly and that you're auto-scaling based on nodes, that you're auto-scaling maybe horizontally, at least one of those. I think when we look back at the largest outages that happen in cloud native and Kubernetes, we know that those outages are happening just based on capacity. So don't let our memory consumption be the next outage that your organization suffers. The other way that we look at chaos engineering, whether it's cloud native or just on a regular system, we want to make sure our customers are always having a great experience. And that means that when possible, if a service is unavailable, our applications should just have a graceful degrade versus allowing the user to see that something is missing or something is broken. Let's say that we want to replicate a graceful degradation, we can go ahead and just inject 400 milliseconds of latency in one of our really critical services and see what's going to happen. Make sure to have some abort conditions, whether the application is unresponsive or an increase in 400, 500 HTTP errors. And this allows for you to see whether your caching layer, your database is able to handle a really common failure. We also get to bring this over to a different portion of the stack called people. People are part of the system. People are very complex. You can just start doing chaos engineering easily on your processes by doing this. The next two examples are not mine. I want to give credit to Dave Renzen, who was one of our 2018 speakers at ChaosConf. Make sure to check out that talk if you want to learn more. Let's say that once a quarter, you select 20% of your team at random, and they are not allowed to respond to an email within those first 60 minutes. Let's say they get an email at 9 a.m., they have to wait an hour until they can respond. You're starting to introduce latency into a big portion of your stack. Do folks look outside of the team if it's highly urgent, or do they just sit and wait until that person responds? Go ahead and ask those questions to your team. Let's say that you want to replicate losing a big portion of your system. Once a week, choose a team and make sure that one of those persons sets out and out of the office. They're not available all day. They can't answer anything. This allows for you to replicate your system and processes that you set up in a way that they're reliable, that if one person is out of the office one day, you're able to keep operations going the rest of the week. And with chaos engineering, you want to make sure to put all these methodologies in practice. One of the ways that you can start practicing is by running game days. Game days are a dedicated time for folks to come together and gain insights on an opportunity to execute 1 to 3 experiments as a team. This is a time to disprove a hypothesis and to test that resiliency of a system and the architecture. They can come together and just put an architecture up and start asking questions just for 2 hours. Go ahead and cross-examine those mental models around your organization and try to build more knowledge. You can also do something called fire drills. Fire drills are a planned event very similar to those that happen on the day-to-day basis, where we go ahead and we validate people and processes. This is designed to make sure that your team knows the proper actions they need to take when an incident occurs or when any specific problem arises. Use this to onboard your next engineer to on-call, or just make sure that your runbooks are up to date. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're learning from failure via experimentation. That is very much the basis of chaos engineering. And I also touched upon continuous chaos. You want to make sure that you're automating chaos engineering experiments in pre-prod environments before you go ahead and automate them into production. Don't forget that you're building really complex applications that are distributed. And there are things that you must test for, or you will suffer that outage. If you're wondering, I don't have anything that I need to test, go ask around. What were some of the largest outages your organization had in 6 months? If not, go out to the community and ask around, what are some of the outages that have happened to you? You can learn from other folks' failure. One of the things that I've been saying this last 2 weeks is go read the postmortem of Slack. They kicked off the year with the large outage and hug offs to Slack to begin with, but go ahead and go learn what they're writing about in that postmortem analysis of their incident. And you want to make sure to be building a culture that lets your engineering team spend more time building and creating value and less time reacting and firefighting and managing that risk. At the end of the day, failure is going to happen. So you want to make sure to run chaos engineering in everything so folks are learning from failure. With that, I would also like to offer y'all a cool sticker sheet from the chaos engineering community. Head on over to gremlin.com/talk/predict-2021 to get a copy of it. I would also like to invite you to join the chaos engineering community with over 6,500 engineers and CTOs from different organizations. You can sign up via gremlin.com/Slack. And if you have any questions or want to touch more base on my predictions of making 2021 the year of chaos engineering, you can always reach out. My email's on the slide at anna@gremlin.com, or I'm available on all the social media via Anna_M_Medina. Thank you all very much. Gracias.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? RecruitOps is the new way to source engineering talent. From MediaOps, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
All right. Up next, we have our Chief Content Officer, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has quite a bit of stuff for us today. First of all, she's going to give us a news roundup of the sites in the media ops world. She's also going to give us a tremendous webinar preview. We have some unbelievable webinars this week. Don't miss them. And then Charlene has 2 good video interviews. One is with James Lee, the COO of ITRC, they're going to talk about their recently released data breach report. And then Charlene has a great panel discussion with some DevOps Institute ambassadors. She'll introduce them on there. There's 3 or 4 of them on, and it's a great discussion as well. So let's now go to Charlene O'Hanlon.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines for you. First up on DevOps.com, we have a piece that looks at the future of the CIO role and how the I could be replaced by a P. Christina Noren, who is a former Chief Product Officer at CloudBees, believes that CIOs are going to be usurped by CPOs as more organizations recognize that digital-first upstarts are coming to eat their lunch. So they too need to be digital first. The role of the CPO is to develop and maintain a deep understanding of the customer and the market and guide the delivery of products to best meet and monetize their needs, and do so ahead of any and all competition. Compare that to the traditional role of the CIO, which is to deploy technology efficiently to support the company's strategies and plans. This article really gets to the heart of why organizations are investing so much in digital transformation, yet some are more successful than others. It's also a wake-up call for organizations that believe it's enough to simply upgrade their infrastructure to be more agile without understanding what it is that their customers need to be successful. Only once they have that level of understanding will they be able to provide the products and services to make it happen. In news, Rewind, a provider of a software-as-a-service platform for backing up cloud services, has acquired a company called BackHub to gain control of a platform for backing up GitHub repositories. Rewind has a slew of offerings to back up everything from QuickBooks to Shopify e-commerce platforms, and the addition of a GitHub backup is a real feather in the company's cap. BackHub makes it possible to back up code stored in GitHub to another cloud service where it can be easily recovered. Rewind is focused on providing data protection for specialized cloud services that usually are overlooked by other backup and recovery tool providers. It claims more than 80,000 organizations are using its platform to protect data stored in a wide range of cloud services that address a specific niche use case. With a rise in data breaches as the result of bad code, this offering definitely is well-timed for Rewind. The best way to determine if a project has been compromised is to compare code bases, and while repositories provide application development teams with version control capabilities, backing up a GitHub repository provides an extra layer of security that can make it easier to recover from a data breach. All right, over on Container Journal, we have an article that looks at the lesser-known benefits of hybrid cloud and Kubernetes. Hybrid clouds are now a way of life for enterprises, and containers, more specifically Kubernetes, are becoming a more popular way of developing cloud-native applications for modern IT environments. But not all enterprises are sold on the technology, in part because they may not understand the relationship between Kubernetes and hybrid clouds. From helping organizations comply with global data privacy regulations to enabling the use of both stateful and stateless applications, the combination of Kubernetes and hybrid cloud are varied, and this article looks at 4 that could be considered most helpful. And we have details of a recent attack against containers that Trend Micro uncovered. The company revealed it had encountered a malicious payload within a Docker container that was specifically crafted to escape from a privileged container in a way that would enable malware to infect all the workloads running on a host machine. Yikes. Most Docker containers are not running in privilege mode, but the attack shows that criminals are getting more adept at exploiting the loosely isolated nature of containers that share the same host machine. The biggest issue is that once a container is configured in a privileged mode, it is rarely turned off. Many developers assume that because a container doesn't run for very long, there is little chance of it being compromised. In reality, however, cybercriminals have developed automation capabilities that enable them to compromise an entire software supply chain and the platforms it depends on in just a matter of minutes. On the plus side, an automation arms race between cyber criminals and cybersecurity vendors is now well underway, and cybersecurity teams should expect to see more behavioral analytics technology that can identify anomalous container behavior indicative of malware, according to Trend Micro. All right, over on Security Boulevard, we have an article that looks at managed detection and response, a cybersecurity technology that is sold as a service and brings real-time threat monitoring and automated response into a business's cybersecurity arsenal. It's no secret that cybersecurity is becoming a losing game for many organizations because they simply don't have the manpower or the technology to keep up with cyber criminals. And the work-from-home paradigm as the result of the pandemic has just exacerbated the issue. In the rush to get employees up and working remotely quickly, faulty VPN configurations and sloppy policy design have left many organizations exposed and vulnerable to attack. MDR, with its advanced threat detection services and response, can be a natural feedback loop to secure access service edge technology, also known as SACE, which effectively creates a private SD-WAN to prevent intrusions from the public internet. Couple that with Zero Trust Network Access, also known as ZTNA, and organizations have a trifecta of technologies to address the growing issue of remote work security. And last but certainly not least is an article that looks at issues around facial tech recognition and consumer safety. You know, the pandemic, as we all know, has vastly altered consumer behavior and shopping habits, and the retail industry, as a result, has undergone a drastic change to adapt to serve the customers' needs. Think curbside pickup, contactless payment, and the like. It quickly became clear that companies that adopted these technologies, which ensured a convenient, safe, and faster service for customers, would come out on top. Contactless payment was already experiencing growing adoption, but the pandemic served as a catalyst, and usage has skyrocketed. But while it's a great option for consumers, it can develop even further when integrated with facial recognition technology. This article takes a look at some of the benefits of facial recognition in delivering an improved user experience in these times of touchless interactions, as well as helping reduce fraud and theft by false identity. All right, that's it for today's headlines. Please check back with me tomorrow when I will have a fresh batch for you. Until then, have a great day. Please stay safe.
Back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here with another episode of the DevOps Institute Ambassador Insights panel discussion. I'm so excited to have these on a monthly basis with some very, very smart people who also happen to be ambassadors with the DevOps Institute. And each month we have a different topic of discussion to align with our monthly spotlight topics on DevOps.com. This month, we are going to be talking about cloud native and cloud native technologies. And so I have some experts in the field right now. First up, we have Leonardo Murillo, who is the CTO of Quinix Technologies. Hey, Leonardo, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Charlene. I really appreciate it. It's great.
All right. Next up, we have Tracy Bannon, who is the Senior Principal and DevOps Strategic Advisor and Software Architect at MITRE. Tracy, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the invite.
Great. And finally, last but not least, we have Pavel Piwash, who is leads system engineer at EPAM Systems. Pavel, thank you as also for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Great. So let's dive right into the discussion. I know we've been talking on DevOps.com and Container Journal a lot about cloud native, but I'm not sure actually that a lot of people understand exactly what we mean when we say cloud native. So maybe we should set the stage, if you will. Leonardo, maybe you can start us out since you are really
mindset and patterns to apply when we're building both systems as well as organizations, which is kind of like one of the things that I want to discuss today, right? Because cloud native is not just how you build technology. And you don't really need the cloud to build cloud natively, right? Usually when you think in terms of cloud nativeness, you're thinking about loosely coupled architecture, you're thinking about containerization, immutability, statelessness, right? All of these are components that are incorporated in a cloud native solution. And I think the organization has also to become cloud native. And that's where DevOps becomes really important, right? To be able to leverage and really take advantage of all the different qualities, right? That the cloud has basically surfaced and made available, right?
I mean,
what do you think, Tracy?
To extend on that, so foot stomp for what you've said already, and love that you want to talk about the organization. We can talk about, I call it a reverse Conway maneuver.
Right.
So there's a lot to be said. I'm actually finding that there's not agreement on what cloud native is. There's an argument. It means containers. Well, yes, and let's talk about serverless and the impact of serverless. So it's not a specific architecture pattern, but it does mean that we are building to take the best advantage of the infinite scalability, right? And the self-healing nature and other aspects of cloud. Love your point as well, Leonardo. While we say it needs to be on cloud proper, building for cloud, right, doesn't mean that I'm necessarily hosting in AWS, GCP, et cetera, and so on. It means that I have applied those principles, and I can do that within my data center, my private cloud, or whether I'm paying somebody else to be the host for me.
I agree.
Yes, that's true, and it's not only about the application. It's about everything what is around. For example, CI/CD, how we store our code, how we approach to the code, how we approach the security networking, because this is something what we very often forget when we are going to the cloud, right? Mm-hmm. So platform as a service, we have everything. We don't need experts. Right?
Don't get me started at all.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting point, is that there are so many fantastic capabilities that are being provided as a service that I don't think that folks actually know where to begin. I've had some awesome infrastructure folks who go out and they do some Googling, or they do some research, and they come up with a reference architecture, and heaven forbid, but God love them, they go out and spin it up and push the button, and wow, this is a good solution for my firm or for my client or for my needs. And it isn't necessarily. So there's a lot of trade space that we have that we're unintentionally losing with the rapidity that we're trying to move towards cloud. Architecture should be more important, not less important. It shouldn't be a stalling factor up front. But I jokingly say that in order to push some value, provide value out into industry or to my clients, I have to be doing that from vision forward. Right. And I can't take a steel girder and put it through a wood chipper. Right. It's not going to work because it wasn't constructed and thought of that way. But Leonardo, to your point earlier, as much as the technology to me is the fun and sexy part, the human aspect really needs to be dealt with as well. We talk about it a lot on the DevOps piece of it, the DevOps portion or support effort on it. But you really bring up that cloud native requires us to think about the organizational structure and the building a separate culture than what we've had before. I'd be interested in what you think about some of the emerging software factories, or should I say continued proliferation of software factories as the way to move forward on software.
I think that actually talks about kind of like a different subject, and mm-hmm. I'd like to kind of like step back a little and think, because you mentioned something that is very much aligned to this, and it's the whole strategy as to how you approach the cloud, right? It's not just about clicking a button and going in, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, that has a lot of resonance to what DevOps is all about, right? If you think into kind of like the kata mindset, right? Define your North Star first, right? Assess your current state. Think about it consciously and mindfully, right? I think if organizations that are looking to go into the cloud or mature into the cloud do take that step, do take time, they will be able to maneuver this gigantic ecosystem of tools that are out there and technologies that are out there. Because I think there's there's also an interesting component that we should discuss. You mentioned, Tracy, how it's not just about the technology, it's also about the humans, right? The people that are implementing. But I think that also resonates with the fact that technology is not there just for the sake of picking the latest and greatest tool, right? I read this great post by somebody that I can't recall that basically talked about how boring is good. Like how boring technology is good because people are used to it and they're kind of like aware of how it works. And I think the closer you are in your evolution path to what is comfortable, the better. And I think that's one of the problems that I sometimes see in cloud adoption. People try to bite too big of a chunk of change at a given time, right? Mm-hmm. And there's so much to choose from to make that huge bite that an actually targeted approach that is mindfully defined, that is well strategized, will solve a lot of these problems, right? Because it will give you signal amongst all this ecosystem noise that teams are going to be exposed to, right? So, Pavel, you're kind of like engineering these solutions, right? How do you work around this ultra diversity of available technologies when you're building something?
Yeah, and this is honestly speaking very big problem, because right now together with cloud we gain much more speed with everything, really. So imagine like 20 years ago you had a server room with racks and servers there. So you change only the server, but the logic inside was still the same. Today we are jumping, let's stay with AWS. We are jumping from EC2 instances to microservices, then to serverless microservices, then to serverless itself. Who knows what we will find next year, for example, right? You need to switch your mindset here. This is something what especially old kind of sysops, I am old kind of sysop, people have in mind, right? The same for networking, for security, that there is a huge difference in speed here. So you need to incorporate into your mind like things like do fast, fail fast, learn fast, especially learn fast, because we are forgetting about this very often, too often, I would say. And also we are forgetting very often in the trenches about security of the cloud. Because we're saying, okay, we have shared responsibility model. So they are responsible for everything. We just running our application and don't care about anything else. What is really, really wrong, I believe.
And I think that points to a fundamental misunderstanding, right, of what security in the context of cloud native architecture is all about, right? And I also think about, Tracy mentioned this infinite capacity, right? And you mentioned, Pavel, going fast. I've been thinking a lot recently as to how those two components need also to be very effectively managed by leadership, by those that are sponsoring this initiatives, right? Because after all, and this is something that I've been talking about lately, right? We have optimized for speed alone already without having really awareness of the impact that would have on the environment and many things, right? And I think we really need to establish a mindset where engineering teams are aware that infinite capacity doesn't mean just free for all, grab whatever amount of resources you have, that shared response security is not infinite, overwhelming security, right? And I think this is also relevant in the context of the tooling that we were talking about, right? Like everything now is about kind of point and click. You download a package, you have deployment. You download another package, you have authentication and connectivity, right? And we don't go into the detail necessary to understand kind of like supply chain of all these solutions. So I think that's where the mindset of DevOps, right? Reduce waste, also becomes very, very relevant, right? Just because you have infinite capacity doesn't mean you can be wasteful, or you don't have to be constantly evaluating the outcome of your ongoing efforts, right? So I think that's very important.
There's a treasure trove of topics that you just landed on. So it sounds like it could be a longer conversation. So in terms of reducing waste, one of the things that I'll put out there is that I believe in what I've observed with teams that I run or teams that I'm reviewing the contents, is that some of the cloud capabilities have made us I think lesser programmers, lesser developers, because we're not concerned about the same things that we were before. We've delegated authority or we've delegated that concern. I've seen some pretty hideous performance-wise if I were to run it anywhere other than in being able to up my compute. It used to be that we had to be concerned because it cost a lot to add additional resources, right? If it wasn't as performant as we needed to be, you just threw more hardware at it. That went away for a long time because it was cost prohibitive. Well, we've almost gone back and revisited that in some ways. From a security perspective, it's always been my perspective that it needs to be baked in. It has to be part of the ecosystem. So when folks started talking about DevSecOps, I was actually against that because DevOps means that there's a security a part of it. But I do understand that it was at times not thought about. Our developers need to be educated, but they need to be held accountable because there is a group effort. Now, when I say developers, I mean the athletes who are hands-on, they are engineering with us, they're moving the software forward. But there are two pieces that come to mind with this. There's a limit to how much they can consume. Mentally, there's a limit to how much they consume. I'm looking at Powell's background. I'm thinking to myself, I love all the stickers, and yet those are all the technologies that he's considering, that he's looking at. So as leaders in technology, one of the things that we need to do is to provide guidance to the folks who are on our teams to help them reduce the noise. It doesn't mean to ignore the new things, but it does mean go ahead and get to finished, get to done on one thing, get it working, learn from it, and then improve it. And if improving it means that there's a certain amount of acceptable refactoring or pulling in another tool, absolutely, right? That's technology insertion. That's a good, smart thing. But it does also mean that we don't instantly glom onto everything that's coming along. I have one organization in particular where every team is allowed to have the autonomy and latitude. And I'm just there as an observer. And it's a little bit of melee. There are lots of good pockets of interesting things, but because there's such technical diversity, even in a small space, they're having a hard time because they're not able to get crisp and good and deliberate with the first set of tools. To your point earlier, Powell, they're not getting good enough with what they're doing before they're switching on to something else. So cloud native mindset is pretty important, but helping to folks understand cloud native from what is it from a patterns perspective? What are the architectural trade-offs for it? And then helping them to make selections and stick with it long enough to get a success, I think are really keys to helping organizations.
So do you guys think that that cloud native is kind of an all or nothing proposition? Or organizations, have you seen organizations kind of going like all in on cloud native and then maybe pull back?
I've seen them going all in, and I've seen them crash and burn.
All right then.
I think I was talking the other day as to if everybody knows juggling is like really good for the brain, but if you try to learn to juggle with kind of like your most precious items, you'll never learn because you're going to be very afraid. I think it's the same about cloud and DevOps, right? Everybody knows it's great. Everybody knows there's going to be a lot of value out of it. But if you try to learn it with your most precious things, for instance, your entire organization, you're going to have a lot of resistance to getting it right. So I think the same applies for DevOps and cloud native. I think you need to iterate. You need to start small with projects that you're capable of experimenting with, right? This is kind of like the whole concept of a culture of experimentation and iteration is important, right? But there's got to be awareness to the fact that you cannot just experiment with everything, right? Or with everything at the same time. So what I mentioned, right? Bite small pieces at a time, iterate do concepts, and use those concepts to build kind of your operating model, right? What does a cloud mean to you for your organization, right? And then expand up until you have a very solid framework that is well established, well understood, and then you can kind of like start juggling with fire, but not until then.
That also helps us think through greenfield versus brownfield. I deal a lot with governments and a lot with federal governments and different agencies in defense. And there's a tremendous amount of brownfield. It doesn't mean that it's old brownfield, but it means that there's something pre-existing. So there have to be decisions made about where do I add on the cloud native? Do I do it around the edges? Is it incremental? Am I doing strangler, fig tree patterns, et cetera, and so on? That's one piece of it. Net new sometimes is a good place to try cloud native, right? Because you do have perhaps less confines around it. So take something smaller that's greenfield and make your first foray that way. I think it's an interesting conversation about the starting and stopping points for cloud native. I noticed, and I'd like to hear, Powell, if you've seen the same thing. I saw everybody lift and shift as quickly as they could. I want to get rid of my data centers. I'm just going to move my workloads, right? I'm going to move my workloads. So they moved their workloads, and I naturally thought the progression would be to PaaS, or would to be to cloud native and to the refactoring. What I actually observed was a pendulum swing to the analytics side. And so there was I have all of this compute available to me. I have less expensive storage. I'll move over to the analytics side. And we're just starting to see, I think, a real increase in the cloud native application space, unless you're truly talking about upstarts and greenfielding. Has been much less of it with the brownfield and the incremental improvements.
Yeah, I agree with you. So first of all, if you just do lift and shift to cloud, whatever we call cloud, you'll cry very soon. So this is the first thing. Second, yes, we have a lot of possibilities regarding analytics. We have beautiful words right now, or buzzwords like observability, telemetry, etc., etc. So we just expanding our monitoring, let's say old-fashioned monitoring, to the new areas and collect more and more and more structured things. So this is something what is very, very easily achievable, but also, and this is a relation to the previous topic here. If you start with cloud, or you are already in the cloud, there should be still logic behind everything, because today is so tempting. Because you do not have to do the initial investment, right? You just click button and start using serverless, or just create a big cluster of something, right? And then in my work, I observed this multiple times. Then you create a really crazy solution for very simple thing. And well, what can go wrong in this, right? So you are using like 10 or more technologies, which are completely different. You are trying to wire them together. And then you are saying, okay, I know 20 technologies. It looks perfectly well in my CV. But when you talk with people, you just realize that it doesn't work as it should work, really. That's why very often organizations which are going to cloud and do not take logic in this, how it is organized, how it is architectured, how this even developed, they are paying much more, not just because they did lift and shift, but they started to create a very, very crazy solutions, right? And this is kind of ways to Leonardo, you mentioned as well.
I'm going to throw out just a couple quick words that'll make people cringe. But when I think about, so agility, 20 years ago, right, the Agile Manifesto, there's a woman named Linda Northrup from the Software Engineering Institute at Carnegie Mellon who said it was one of the worst things that ever happened to software architecture, because unintentionally there was this emergent architecture. My architectures will just emerge. I don't have to worry about them in advance. I want to push forward that enterprise architecture needs to still exist, but in a different form, in a different format, there still needs to be, it's okay for there to be somebody more senior, somebody who is helping to drive the architecture and helping to pick which cloud technologies and where cloud native is the most appropriate. Because there's even trade space, right? Even if I talk containers, there's different trade spaces between how I'm using the containers and how I'm moving forward with that. Does that resonate with you, Powell and Leonardo?
Yes. Yes, I would even add here that if you want to be cloud native, your developers need to be cloud native. So there is no more, it works on my machine. This is obvious, right? But also I will be bold here. So even development should go into cloud. And this is another layer here, which we didn't touch, but it is very important, I believe. So.
Well, I feel like we could have this conversation for at least another hour, but unfortunately, we got to wrap things up, guys. But I do appreciate Tracy and Pavel and Leonardo for your insights. You guys are great. I'm going to have you both, all three of you, back on, and we'll talk about other things in the future. We have lots of topics to get through this year. So you guys, the level of intelligence and insight you guys bring to these conversations is just so value added. So I do appreciate your time in joining me today for another one of our DevOps Institute Ambassadors panel discussion. So thank you guys again. Really do appreciate it. And please do stay in touch with me. Really, absolutely love to get your expertise back on the show. So.
All right. Fantastic. Be well. Stay safe, everybody.
That's great.
Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, we've got lots more TechStrong TVs coming up. So stay right here. There's lots more to come. So stay tuned.
CISO Talk. To hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with James Lee, who is the Chief Operating Officer at the ITRC. James, thanks so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for asking.
Okay. I am interested in hearing about the data breach report that the ITRC recently, you guys put it out on January 27th or 28th or something like that. I can't remember exactly.
Yep. The 28th, because it was
the 28th.
It was Data Privacy Day. So
that is right. That's right. I knew there was a connection there. I just forgot about it. So, but yeah. So tell me a little bit about the report, the background of it, and how long have you guys been putting this out?
Sure. We started tracking data breaches back in 2005. So this is our 15th annual report. And back in the first report coming out of 2005, we were tracking basically name, rank, and serial number. If you had a data breach and maybe how many people were impacted and things of that nature. It was fairly limited in scope, but we began tracking it there. And we have, in the intervening years, amassed now a very comprehensive database where we track up to 90 data points on every data breach that is publicly reported in the U.S. Now, not every event has 90 data elements, but we can collect up to 90 per data breach, and we continue to expand that a little bit each year as new forms of data compromises come out, and the data itself tends to also migrate as well. The broader trends that we saw this year were continuations of things we have sort of been given a little preview of over the last couple of years, but now became very clear in the last year. And although we went into 2020, I think all of us did, thinking once the pandemic hit that we were going to see skyrocketing number of data breaches, but in reality, we saw a 19% reduction.
Really?
There were fewer data breaches and data events, and I'll talk about it in a second. We kind of break these into two chunks, but there were fewer data events, data breaches, and there were fewer people impacted. So if the number of data breaches was down 19% year over year, the number of individuals impacted was down 66%. So 2/3 reduction from 2019 and 2020. Both of those trends you can trace back a couple of years. So we hit the high watermark in terms of the number of events in 2017. So we're down a full third from their high watermark in 2017.
Wow. That's really fascinating.
Yeah. If you look at the number of individuals impacted, then we're down 88% since the high watermark of individuals, which was actually in 2016. Now, some of that's counterintuitive, when we think about what we see and what we hear, and particularly people in cybersecurity, because we're so close to it. We see those daily attempts to breach systems, and we see all the things that the threat actors do. It's a little counterintuitive, but when you dig underneath it, it also begins to make sense. So if digging underneath it means a couple of things. One, let's look at what is an actual data breach. So we have started breaking it into two parts, because there is a true data breach where somebody will get into your system and they will exfiltrate data. They will remove that data from wherever it was created and stored. And that's a true data breach. And we know there is risk associated with that, either to the company because it's intellectual property, or to individuals because it's personal information. That actually, in terms of the number of individuals, is now the smallest component of the number of people impacted, because we're seeing fewer data breaches and there are fewer people associated with that data. Now, the other part, though, is data compromises, data exposures, where somebody forgot to put the password on the cloud environment. So those are actually a smaller number of events. So if we have roughly 1,000 data breaches, we only had a little over 100 data exposures where the cloud environment was left open to the web. But because those are massive databases, the number of individuals who are put at risk is higher. So there's more people put at risk through those data compromises than there have been through the data breaches. Now, those data exposures, the data compromises, much lower risk, because we know, because of the analytics that the companies have around them, and we just know how the way things work with the cloud, you have to know where to look to see that data, and you can generally tell if it's been removed, if it's been exfiltrated, and there's no indication in those kinds of events that actually occurred. So is there elevated risk? Yes, it's because there's no password, but it's not like the data breaches. So when you look at all that together, what we see is a maturing threat landscape. The threat actors themselves have become more organized, more sophisticated. Their attacks are more complex. And frankly, they don't need as much information as they have historically. 5 years ago, they would hoover up everything they could find. There was no piece of data that was too esoteric. They would suck it all up, and they would find a way to monetize it over time. Now what we're seeing is they're being highly targeted and highly selective. Whereas a few years ago, malware would have been the number one cyber attack. Maybe they were taking advantage of unpatched software. In this most recent report, and you can trace this back very specifically to Q3 2018, ransomware and phishing are the number 1 and 2 forms of attack. Phishing is number 1, ransomware is number 2, but with a bullet. So it's closing rapidly. Neither one of those attacks are designed to either accumulate mass amounts of information, and they don't require mass amounts of information to actually execute. So what we've seen is a very strategic approach by the cyber criminals who are taking this approach of, why would I want to attack 1,000 individuals and get maybe $300, which is about the average that you get in an individual cyber attack? Why would I do 1,000 people for $300 when I can go to one company and I can hold them ransom, or I can engage in a business email compromise. Well, I get them to wire money to an account that I control as opposed to, the actual person who's owed money by them. When I can get that $300,000 or more in one event, and then I can go on and do it again and again and again. So we're seeing the threat actors operate fundamentally differently today.
Yeah, that is both heartening and terrifying to me because, I hear about, data breaches happening all the time. And we've covered, it seems like on Security Boulevard, a lot more information about ransomware attacks this year and phishing attacks, especially with COVID-19 and everybody's working from home. And that kind of expands the threat landscape, if you will, and employees maybe aren't as diligent when they're working at home as they are in the office, and they don't have a lot of the same security technologies that would help protect them at home. So, we have been hearing a lot about those particular types of threats to the effect of, I think I heard something along the lines of ransomware increased, I want to say like 800% or something this year. I mean, it's just an amazing amount. I have to wonder as we think about the new kind of paradigm of working, everybody's working from home or they're working in a hybrid environment. And as these attackers do become more sophisticated, do we need to focus more on those particular types of threats, ransomware and phishing? I mean, or do we really need to kind of hyper focus on protecting against those over other more traditional types of threats?
That is the question of the hour. Our answer to that would be, this is not a matter of stopping what we've been doing and pivoting so much as it is expanding. What has helped in reduction of these numbers that we've seen historically, along with the bad guys just getting smarter, but one of the reasons they get smarter is they're trying to defeat the defenses we put in place. So we can't remove those defenses. We have to now expand our defenses into these new kinds of threats, which are less technology based. It's not about, anymore anyway, it's not just about making sure your apps are patched. It's not just about having the right firewall settings and security rules in place. It's now about behaviors. It's about how we behave. And so to your point around working from home and not having the same level of security and tools and things of that nature, that is going to be with us. So what behaviors do we have to modify to make sure we're doing everything we can to prevent the threat actors from getting through and either committing a business email compromise through a phishing attack or through a ransomware attack? Now, some ransomware is good old-fashioned, we're going to exploit a flaw in your system. But the vast majority that we were seeing as the year went on are instances that were tied to what data the bad guys actually want today, and that is logins and passwords. You mentioned hyper-focused. They are hyper-focused on that. If you look at the relative value of data by looking at the marketplaces where it's bought and sold, we probably all, if you ask somebody, they would say, well, my social security number is probably the most valuable thing that I have. Or they would say, maybe it's my credit card or something like that. A social security number is $4 or less in an identity marketplace. You know what the most expensive is today? It's your Gmail account. If I can get the login and password to your Gmail account, I would have to pay on one of these marketplaces, I would pay $155 per set. $4 for your social security number, $155 for your Gmail login. Your credit cards, a MasterCard with the PIN and everything, the full set of data around a MasterCard, $15. $35 for your Amex, $25 for your Visa. The relative value of those things has gone down because that's too much effort and too much risk for the bad guys. They've gotten very smart. And remember, they're running businesses. They're illegitimate businesses, but they're businesses. They have call centers. They have help desks. they make charitable contributions now. So they are looking and acting just like we do, except it's for an illicit purpose. So we have to then modify our behaviors now to take into account what they are doing. So what do you have to do to make sure they don't get your logins and your passwords? Well, this is where our work behavior and our personal behavior now intersect. Usually, historically, it's been pretty easy to keep those two things separately. I had a work laptop. I had my home computer. I had a device that was given to me by my office, and I had my home phone. Well, now everybody carries the same device. It doesn't have a cord attached to it anymore. Most people, they're going to say that, well, of course I use my work laptop at home when I'm working from home. And we know from statistics and research that there's a significant number of people who are doing their work on their home devices, which do not have generally the same level of security. So we've got to look at those behaviors, and in particular around passwords and other forms of credentials. And the processes of verifying requests. We were already seeing phishing, ratchet up even before the pandemic, and now it's really ratcheted up. The FBI says it was $1.8 billion a year. That's a lot of fake emails and a lot of fake websites, and now you have to worry about fake texts and fake social media accounts. So we have to look at those behaviors and we have to modify accordingly.
Yeah. To your point, we need to move beyond, what we've normally considered to be, those traditional phishing attempts by email, and now because social media is very much a part of the threat landscape, and we talk about deep fakes, and we talk about just ways of stealing people's identities and using them for nefarious purposes. How can consumers kind of keep up with that and especially as the technology has become so much more sophisticated, in certain instances, it becomes almost impossible to distinguish what's real and what's fake. So what can consumers do to kind of keep themselves protected, regardless?
That's a great question, because, it is more difficult. And this is part of that sophistication. The threat actors, they have access to some very interesting tools. Just this week, there was a new one that was getting some attention in the trade media called Logo Kit, that in a matter of minutes, it can create a legitimate looking website. And the purpose of the website is not to do anything other than to get your login and password. It's to get you to verify what that is. And once they have that, they know that chances are you're going to use that on multiple accounts, and you're going to use it working at home. So they're going to then go to work to try to find out how many ways they can use that to try to break into companies. Either maybe it's your employer, maybe it's some other place you have an account. So for consumers, the main thing is you have to be very skeptical of anything that just comes to you. If it's one thing if I initiate a contact with Microsoft, it's another thing if Microsoft reaches out to me. There's a very limited number of circumstances why Microsoft is going to reach out to me. And when they do, if I can't immediately look at that and tell that's not right, or that's okay, that's legitimate, the thing every consumer should do is ignore it. Go to the Microsoft website. Go to your app on your phone that it connects you to Microsoft. If you have an account with them, you're going to have ways of dealing with them directly, and ask them, did you send me? Or is my account really locked? And the other things we have to get used to looking for, rather than just kind of glancing at who sent something. Oh, I got something from Microsoft. Actually look at the address. Now, they've made that, a lot of the email providers now have made it easy, because now that from line comes already open. So not only do you see the name, you actually see the address. And that's a very key thing in phishing attempts, is the name and the address don't match. If you see that, if it's just a series of numbers and it doesn't actually say Amazon.com or Microsoft.com, then ignore it. And this is one of those times when the old advice is, well, if it's important, they'll send it again. It actually does apply.
Right.
And the same thing for texts, because now I can't tell you how many texts a week I get telling me that I have my Amazon accounts locked.
Right.
Go to your Amazon account and check it out.
Mm-hmm.
When you do set up your own home credentials and your home security things, don't just pay attention to the device that you're using, your laptop, because it probably came with some form of antivirus or anti-malware. There are other devices in your house on your network that you also need to make sure are secure, that you've got a secure password on it, that it may require updating. Your home router that runs your home network, that software has to be updated. It has to be patched. It has to have a secure password. If you've got a tablet, if you've got your iPhone, you've got your Apple TV, whatever it is, you may have a toaster that connects to the internet. Make sure that the toaster has the right password on it.
Anybody needs an internet connected toaster is beyond me, but that's another story for another time. So
well, your thermostat. Everybody has their thermostat, or your refrigerator that orders your groceries from Instacart. All those devices have to have passwords and logins, and every one of them needs to be unique. And that's a pain. We all know that's a pain. The average person now is approaching 100 accounts that require a password. And I don't know about you, but that's a lot to remember. And human nature says, you know what? I'm going to cheat. I'm going to have 4 or 5 and I'll rotate them through.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not something we can do in this environment where our login and our password really is the keys to the kingdom, both at work and at home.
That's a very good point. And I after this conversation, I'm going to go change my Gmail password and make sure that I am protected. James, thank you so much for walking me through this. This is really illuminating, and I appreciate your sharing the information with us. And I'm glad to hear that data breaches are going down. I'm not so glad to hear that those targeted breaches or targeted attacks are on the rise. So I guess that's just the world we live in these days. So what are you going to do? So, all right. Well, thanks again. I really do appreciate your time and your expertise. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We have lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so please stay tuned.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with the Monday edition of the webinars previews. As always, I tell you, we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Here are 3 that are coming up very quickly, letting you know about in the hopes you can mark your calendar and attend. The first one is called Security Policy Management in Hybrid Cloud Environment. It is happening Tuesday, tomorrow, February 16th at 11 a.m. on Security Boulevard, and it's sponsored by Tufin. The need to centrally manage security policies across cloud and hybrid environments has become super critical for environments or organizations to retain the agility and speed of cloud deployment and reduce risk due to misconfigurations and compliance requirements, and to accurately project and control costs. So as cloud adoption continues to grow at the anticipated rate over the next few years, the mandate to deploy a strategy that includes a centralized security policy management will also grow. So this is a great webinar that walks attendees through the what's and whys of a centralized security policy, and it's a must for organizations that are using hybrid cloud environments. Next up is how vertical change secures sensitive data using open source tools. This one is happening tomorrow also, Tuesday, February 16th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by Teleport, and it features Dylan Stamak, who is the CTO of Vertical Change. And he's going to talk about his company's technology and how it works with Teleport. The Vertical Change platform runs in the cloud with security and availability being paramount.
and it has been audited by AWS. So the team has onboarded a variety of newer open source tools and set up open source projects such as Kubernetes, Teleport, and PostgreSQL to work together. This sounds like a really interesting conversation. I can't wait to hear about the technology. All right, finally today we have Finding and Preventing Secrets in Code. This one is happening Wednesday, February 17th at 3 p.m. Eastern. It is sponsored by Blue Bracket. This webinar will examine how hackers look for and find secrets in code, and will show how to prevent leaking them in the first place using DevSecOps. Some of the key takeaways from this webinar is how to find and prevent secrets in code of all types, how to shift security left and arm developers with the tools to prevent secrets in code, how to use free tools for robust and scalable secrets detection, and how to integrate them in your CI/CD pipeline, and finally, how engineers can receive prizes and incentives for giving feedback to a new secrets detection tool. All right, that's it for today's webinar's preview. Please check back with me tomorrow when I'll have a fresh batch of webinars to tell you about. Until then, have a great day. Please stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Marco Palladino, CTO for Kong Inc., talking about this massive amount of funding they raised and what the plan is. Marco, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, so now that you've kind of sent a virtual coffee or beer or whatever it is to everybody who works at Kong Inc. for helping to raise this funding, what's the plan? Why do you need $100 million for? What are you guys thinking about?
Well, funding is always good in order to grow the company above and beyond what we can do organically. And so this $100 million is going to be very helpful for us to keep reinvesting in the products, in the engineering teams, into growing the business across the world in much bigger ways than we would be able to do if this was just organic revenue. And so think of funding really as an accelerator in our case.
And when you say organic and inorganic, so inorganic would refer to acquisitions. Are there areas that you feel that you need to expand into? And because I feel like you're building this almost application connectivity platform and it does all this routing, but how broadly does that thing need to extend or reach, or what's the plan?
Kong right now is sitting on a massive opportunity. When we're looking at what the enterprise organizations are doing, they're connecting more and more services together in order to create their modern applications. And Kong really powers that connectivity. So right now, we are at the beginning of these new market transition in the world where connections become the backbone of every modern application. And so when we look at what everybody's doing, not just the large enterprise organizations, but the smaller ones too, every time they build something, they connect them. They connect services together, they connect applications together. And we provide the technology that allows them to do all of that. And so the funding allows us to create bigger and better connectivity products. It allows us to grow our field team so that we can support these customers. It allows us to grow worldwide in order for us to capture this opportunity.
What is the challenge going to be exactly? We hear about microservices a lot, and we know that people are building those, but monolithic applications aren't going away anytime soon. So what is going to be the right mix? Are we basically going to have both of these side by side for years to come? And if so, how do we kind of manage that?
And monolithic applications are very hard to transition to microservices. The ones that are critical are going to be transitioned, right? Because we cannot keep them as monolithic. They're going to hurt the business. Then there's going to be a lot of them that it would make no sense to transition to microservices because they're good the way they are. These ones are still going to be connected to the new ones that are built in microservices, but themselves, they're not going to be transitioned. So they're going to be integrated within these new greenfield microservices applications in such a way that if the microservices application wants to consume an API or wants to consume the monolithic application, The monolith, it is a big service as opposed to being a microservice within the overall architecture.
Where do service meshes and API gateways and ingress controllers fit in? And how much of that do I need to know about as a developer, or can you extract that away? Because I feel like things are getting pretty complex.
Yeah, so we can take a step back, right? When we create new applications, we create usually 3 different kinds of connectivity. There is connectivity at the edge, when we want to expose our APIs to an ecosystem of developers or partners or mobile apps at the outside of the organization, right? So that's one use case. Then there is connectivity across all the applications within the organization. So I'm building an app and I want this other team in this other line of business to being able to consume the application, right, inside of the org. And then there is a third kind of connectivity within the applications themselves. Some of these applications are going to be monolithic. Some of them are going to be microservices. And the ones that are microservices are the ones that are going to be having more and more connections within the apps themselves. So for the first case, at the edge, we can use a gateway at the edge. For the second scenario, we can use a gateway inside of the organization so that we can govern how applications are being consumed within the org. And then for the third and last case, we can use service mesh to secure and observe our traffic within the applications themselves. When we think of service mesh, service mesh, it's been always presented as this extra thing we have to do that's necessary, or it's so complicated, it's so complex. But really, when we look at service mesh, we have to think about the fact that this is an opportunity for us to remove all the extra code and the extra capabilities that the application developers have built in the services themselves. The problems that service mesh solves do not disappear if we don't use a service mesh. They're still there. The difference is that without a service mesh, the teams are the ones that are building that security, that observability, that routing. So service mesh is a chance for us to make them more efficient. They should stop doing that. The job of the application teams, it is not to manage connectivity. It is to build the applications. So they can stop doing that, whereas the service mesh provides this new security, this new observability, this new discovery and routing capability out of the box for them.
Will that make IT overall more agile? I feel like people can spin up a virtual machine in a couple of minutes, but they still spend days and weeks waiting for somebody to get them a network connection to something. So is this whole thing going to just start moving faster because we figured out how to put this layer of abstraction in above the network layer?
This connectivity really should be provisioned as part of the underlying infrastructure provisioning. So if I am an application team or developer wanting to create a new app, I provision a new, let's say, Kubernetes cluster, and that Kubernetes cluster already comes provisioned out of the box with a service mesh that's ready to go, or with a gateway that is ready to go. It is very important that obviously there is all this new set of technologies that we're going to be using in the future, and today really, it is important that we integrate this within the current pipelines, because yes, to your point, if that doesn't happen, well, then things are not really connected together when a new team wants to create something new. And by the way, this is not just about Kubernetes. This is also about virtual machines. There is nothing that says, oh, service mesh, it's Kubernetes only, or, this pattern, it's Kubernetes only. It's not true. It can be Kubernetes, but can be also virtual machines. As a matter of fact, one of the things that Kong does, it is being able to support both the gateways and the virtual machines and Kubernetes on every cloud, with no distinction. We think of ourselves as the Switzerland of software, of connectivity, because we're neutral. We can provide connectivity software across any environment, any cloud. It is not just Kubernetes. But of course, if it is Kubernetes, then there is a very native experience there.
There's a lot of internecine debate over service meshes these days. There's lots of different varieties. How do you think this is all going to shake out? You guys have one that you put forward to the CNCF, or Google and IBM have Istio. There's a Linkerd, a couple other things. So, are they all going to survive, or will there be a single standard?
Let's take a step back. Let's forget about what we're doing. So of course, we provide a service mesh project called Kuma, and Kuma is integrated within the overall enterprise platform. But let's take a step back. We didn't want to create Kuma. We did create Kuma because we tried other service meshes, and they were extremely complex. They were hard to use, hard to scale, hard to deploy. But most importantly, there was no Envoy-based service mesh that was truly open. And this was problematic for us. We wanted to, when we build something, we must rely on open software. And when it comes to service mesh, when it comes to even Istio, Istio is not part of CNCF. Istio is not part of CNCF the way Kubernetes was. Therefore, it is donated to another foundation that Google has created that upset a few folks. And among these folks, it's us. We have to build on top of open source software that's truly neutral, that's truly protected with open governance. And that's why when we built Kuma, not only we did it in order to create a better service mesh, but the first thing that we did was to donate it to CNCF, right? To make it the first Envoy-based service mesh in the foundation. Kubernetes was donated to CNCF, and that was critical for Kubernetes to succeed because it allowed Kubernetes to be implemented across multiple cloud vendors, across multiple partners in a neutral way, right? And that's why Kubernetes is today what it is today. With Service Mesh, something else has happened. Service Mesh has been a closer play for the cloud vendors. Therefore, now everybody has their own service mesh. And so Microsoft has their own, and AWS has their own, and Google's has their own. And when it comes to service meshes, and when it comes to deploying the service meshes across the enterprise, it is important that we don't fragment how we provision that connectivity. And so I believe that, again, neutral technologies, the ones that are truly open, are going to be the ones that will be successful, because those are the ones that you can deploy everywhere. Those are the ones that really care about what the user is doing. There is no other agenda in the technology other than helping the architects and the developers, being successful in the things that they're doing. And because they're truly open, there is a guarantee in the future that nothing is going to happen to them.
Okay. So regardless of how the service mesh wars play out, do you think that network operations and DevOps are going to converge one way or another because of service meshes and all these technologies? And, will the way IT is currently structured change?
It will not change, but evolve. We cannot hide the fact that our software is going to be connected. And either the application teams are going to build that connectivity, or they are going to be the ones consuming that connectivity. We don't want the application teams to build their own data center every time they create a new application, do we? We don't. For the same reason, we don't want them to build their own connectivity software, because it's not their job. They shouldn't be doing that. That should come as part of the underlying infrastructure. So infrastructure evolves, and in that journey, new patterns and new technologies show up that we can offer to the application teams. The biggest mistake an organization can do, it is to not integrate this connectivity use case within the underlying infrastructure. Therefore, having the application developers on the hook of rebuilding and reinventing the wheel every time they create anything new.
Yeah. So what's your best advice to people right now? I mean, other than obviously hanging out on the Kong website, but if you were running one of these IT organizations, what would you be doing right now to kind of get set for this transition, or, to enable it to happen maybe more naturally than some top-down edict or something?
If I were to be an enterprise architect, I work with lots of them as part of the work I'm doing with Kong. My nightmare would be having the teams doing something they shouldn't be doing, or creating these separate silos that for me are going to be hard to control and hard to secure. So the first thing I would do as an enterprise architect It is to talk with the application developers, understand what are their connectivity use cases, understand what's the minimum, common denominator there, and then offer that as a service within the organization itself. To offer connectivity as a service, the same way we use Kubernetes to offer infrastructure as a service, we need to understand what the teams are doing and what they're struggling with. And once we really have that understanding, at that point, we can put technology in place that can abstract that complexity for them in such a way that they can focus on what matters. And again, that's not building the infrastructure, that's not building the connectivity, that's not building the gateways or the service meshes. What the application teams care about, it is building their applications, growing the business, making sure that the users and the customers are happy, right? If they're doing anything else, that it's not building the app, making sure that the users and the customers are happy, well, that potentially can be something that can be automated. And it is on the enterprise architect to understand that and then to finally automate that.
All right.
And so and so in the case of Kong, obviously, we work with them to automate how connectivity is being provisioned.
All right, it's the classic get rid of all that stuff that doesn't provide differentiated value and focus on the things that do, right?
Exactly.
All right. Hey, Marco, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey, great stuff, Mike. Thanks very much. Guys, that's going to take a wrap on today's show, Monday, February 15th. As usual, we'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, with more fresh and great content. But until then, stay well, stay safe, stay strong, stay tech strong. We're out.